Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. This is the 5th episode of Story in which the 3rd Hokage finally resolves to do something about Naruto's treatment, and he seeks the assistance of someone known for influencing things from the shadows. When Naruto has everything he needs, including an elder brother who will do anything to protect him, what could possibly go wrong? Please subscribe and smash the like button. Now, let's jump right in.
Naruto closed his eyes in concentration, blocking out everything around him. Sounds, scents, feelings, none of them were important anymore, nothing more than mere distractions that would add up to his eventual failure. He reached within himself and searched for the very core of his chakra. Oddly enough, this turned to be rather difficult for him since his chakra only ever started to lose its potency as it exited his body. A skilled sensor, or even a Hyuga that dared to look at him, could easily mistake his entire body as his chakra core, well, except for Izo, but the blindfolded teen was on a whole different level when it came to sensor abilities. Ridding his mind of those thoughts, the blonde concentrated on clearing his mind and body of any outside interference. He needed to actually concentrate on the task at hand and not simply overload it with chakra like he normally did. It had been a difficult and headache-inducing day when he actually learned that some things required a delicate approach. Chakra control was never one of his strong suits, and it was safe to say that it never would be, even after all the adjustments and improvements made to his seal. It was simply impossible to properly filter the Kyuubi's chakra perfectly. Unfortunately, that was almost exactly what Naruto was working on at the moment. He wasn't so much trying to control the power perfectly, he had long since given up on that idea, but focusing it and matching it with his own equally was probably the next best thing. The funny thing was that although the chakra filters couldn't completely purify the Baiju's chakra, it did completely filter out the fox's consciousness, leaving it nothing more than extremely potent and toxic power in a form that could barely be called chakra. The theory was that if Naruto could guide the mindless power with an equal force of his own, then it would be the same as controlling it, to an extent of course. The beauty of theories was that it was always, and he meant always, easier said than done. Attempting to match the raw power of even a single tael's worth of Baiju's chakra was something that even a few Hokage would not dare try, with even fewer being actually capable of the task in the first place. Naruto just so happened to be lucky in that aspect since he actually possessed enough chakra of his own to match almost a tael's worth of the Kyuubi's chakra. The only other person who had those kinds of reserves without using a Baiju or the celestial gates was a missing nin from Karagakure, Kisame Hoshigaki, or something like that. Naruto took a deep calming breath, finally finding his chakra core, and with it the seal that held the Kyuubi. The best part about having the unique and potent chakra of the Uzumaki was that it acted as a near-flawless method of hiding the Baiju's chakra, not that he would need to hide his identity from anyone anymore. Reaching into the seal, the blonde activated one of the extremely helpful additions that Izo had installed. This particular new function of the seal would forcefully extract and filter a specified amount of the Kyuubi's chakra before storing into an easily accessed artificial chakra pool. This process making things much easier for Naruto as he no longer had to fight for the unstable form of chakra. Waiting patiently for the process to complete itself, Naruto thought back to when exactly he had gained a sense of patience. The more he thought about it, the more confused he got. He honestly couldn't remember developing patience at all until Izo messed with his seal. That bastard. He did something to me and lied straight to my face about it. If I wasn't so impressed by what he did, I would be furious, he grumbled mentally. Thankfully, gaining patience was a really good thing for him as it allowed him to do what he was doing right now without falling asleep out of pure boredom. A slight filling sensation in his stomach, not unlike the kind he got after visiting Ichiraku's, informed him that the artificial pool of chakra had been filled to his specifications. Wasting little time, Naruto once again took a deep calming breath as he eased the filter Baiju's chakra into his own reserves, spreading it equally throughout his body. An aura of pure power began to emanate from the boy as his canines started to become more pronounced and elongated, his bright blonde hair ruffling in a non-existent breeze. If he had had his eyes open, one would have been able to see the crimson-red orbs that had replaced the clear ocean blue he was known for. The chakra continued to flow into him, empowering him far more than he could imagine to do on his own. The aura of power quickly began to bleed into a faint red mist around him before blood-red chakra began to bubble out of him, slowly forming into a fox-like cloak. The cloak of chakra maintained its unstable and bubbly appearance as it formed two long ears over the blonde's head, along with a long swaying tail behind him. Almost instantly, after the cloak had manifested itself completely, Naruto exploded with pure and refined chakra, the newfound energy serving to force the cloak into a sleek and stable form around him. This was just another of the more radical additions that Izo had made to the seal. For every tail of Kyuubi's chakra that Naruto started to use, one of his celestial gates would open. It was a miracle that both of the otherwise dangerous forms of chakra actually cancelled each other out, what with the Baijuu's chakra going into overdrive to heal any and all damage caused by the newly opened chakra gate. The all-round benefit of this was that Naruto gained access to enough chakra to guide and stabilize the malevolent essence of the fox without being broken down on a near-molecular level. How Izo managed to accomplish this feat, the blonde wasn't sure, but Kami was thankful. Opening his eyes slowly, Naruto glanced at his hands that were now covered by the smooth and clawed chakra cloak. Every now and then, the cloak would pulse dark blue, this being the only visual sign of his own chakra asserting control over the blood-red chakra. Looking behind him, he wasn't at all surprised to see the long swaying tail that was just as smooth and sharp-looking as the rest of the cloak. The blonde smirked slightly as he found that he was able to move the new appendage through mental command. It would take some getting used to, but it was still awesome all the same. Quickly returning back to his meditating position, Naruto yet again focused himself. The chakra cloak quickly began to waver and lose its smooth appearance as it bulged slightly, the tail starting to bubble and grow thicker. Eventually, the cloak had returned to its unstable and bubbly appearance, although the power emanating from the boy was noticeably stronger. The base of the chakra tail instantly bulged before splitting down the middle, the process continuing up its entire length until two unstable tails were swaying frantically behind him. The blonde grit his teeth as his body exploded with chakra for the second time, forcing the cloak into its sleek and stable form. The second tail, and subsequently the second celestial gate, were probably the most difficult and painful of the three levels he was able to use safely. Sure, the first tail required a bit more focus to form, but the second was simply more painful since it was the one that began to directly damage his body. The third tail was actually rather pleasant compared to the other two, being far more stable and overall easier to attain. From how Izo had explained it, the Kyuubi's tails worked in a system of 3 sets of 3. The first tail of each set required focus and concentration, the second required less but also induced pain and physical damage of varying intensity, while the third tail of each set of 3 acted as the stable and controlled point between each other, the proverbial calm before the storm of each set of tails. Going by that system, Naruto supposed that the third, sixth, and ninth tails were the safest to fight with without losing control of himself, but he was restricted from progressing any further than the third. Due to the numerous alterations and additions to the seal as a whole, Izo had stated, in a far too casual way mind you, that he was unable to accurately predict what would happen should Naruto try to go any further than 3 tails. At best, the blindfolded teen had guessed that the blonde would easily be able to control both the 4th and the 5th tail without much issue, but the 6th tail had the potential to cause problems. Since by that point the 6th celestial gate would be open, the boy's body would begin to break down slowly, whilst also being rebuilt by the Kyuubi's chakra. Due to the fact that by that point the chakra cloak would be forming an almost completely unhuman form, it was safe to assume that it would try to forcefully rebuild Naruto's physiology into something closer to the fox itself. Izo had joked that Naruto would definitely hit it off with the girls should he miraculously grow fox ears and a tail, but assured the blonde that such a thing was extremely unlikely, or at least he didn't think it would happen without reaching the full 9 tails. Naruto didn't want to test any of the theories based around the higher numbered tails, stating that he was content with having control over just 3. With a sigh, the blonde released his control over the Kyuubi's chakra, allowing it to be quickly reabsorbed by the seal before being returned to the Kyuubi itself, his celestial gates closing themselves along with it. Naruto collapsed onto his back from his seated position, panting heavily as sweat ran down his face. Even though he could safely control up to 3 tails, doing so with even 1 tail proved to be a highly exerting task that often left him out of breath. As it was, the chakra cloak was a last resort in his arsenal since if he was unable to defeat an opponent with it he would be left vulnerable. He supposed that's where working with Izo would come in handy, but his brother had made it well known that he didn't want to be relied on. It's good to see that you were able to control 2 tails so easily. But I would much appreciate it if you remembered to activate the seals in this room before you started to pump out that much chakra. Kana and I just had to spend a good 5 minutes calming down Kuro-chan. She thought that you were about to go on some rampage or something, Izo said casually from the other side of the room. How did you get in here? Naruto breathed out exhaustedly. Izo deadpanned at his brother. Like I just said, you didn't activate the seals, you dumbass, he drawled. Oh, sorry. The blonde apologized half-heartedly. Sure you are. Now get up and get your ass to the kitchen. Kana actually made breakfast and you and I both know that our cooking is to die for, the older sibling said excitedly as he opened the large steel door and ran up the stairs. Naruto groaned as he stumbled to his feet and sauntered up the stairs, making sure to close and seal the room as he left. He got to the top of the stairs, which oddly enough were hidden behind a bookshelf, and resealed the entrance before walking to the kitchen. The smell of food was quickly filling the house, ramen being the only one that he found himself caring about. He was beyond thankful that Kana allowed him such a luxury for breakfast, unlike his other, less understanding family member. Walking into the kitchen, Naruto was met with a somewhat fearful-looking Kurotsuchi, an impassive Izo, and a still-masked Kana. He knew who she really was, as did Izo, but she obviously had her reasons for not letting them know herself, and they would respect her privacy. It was weird that they weren't able to act upon their knowledge and get her to take her mask off, but they both agreed that telling her that they knew who she was could possibly cause problems. "About time you got here, Naru-chan," Kana chided lightly. Yeah, I know. I won't forget to activate the seals next time, and I won't be late for breakfast because of training. Can I still have some of your ramen?" he asked, staring at the woman with wide eyes as his bottom lip quivered ever so slightly. Before Kana could respond, Izo had produced a frying pan out of nowhere and bashed the blonde over the head, eliciting a sigh from the woman and a shocked look from Kurotsuchi. Izo shrugged in response. "What can I say, it's almost instinctual now," he said casually. Naruto rubbed his head and glared at the older boy. "I thought you said you wouldn't do that anymore," he muttered with a pout. "I thought you said you would never try to use the puppy dog eyes to get what you want, so we both lied," the blindfolded teen said dismissively. Kana shook her head. "Why, oh why, did I agree to look after you too? My sanity is wavering as it is without you two being idiots all the time," she mumbled quietly. "Anyway, I have a new mission that will take me out of the village for a little while, so I'm counting on you boys to take care of things while I'm gone." "I don't want to come back to a trashed house." "Yes mom," the boys drawled in unison. The masked woman nodded before turning to Kurotsuchi. "As for you, feel free to do as you please within the compound for as long as you're here. If you can't get into somewhere, then chances are you aren't supposed to be there, but everywhere else is perfectly fine for you to explore," she explained in a kind tone. Isn't this my house? Shouldn't I be the one telling her where she can and can't go?" Naruto asked curiously. "Oh Naru-chan, you're so cute when you don't know what you're talking about," Kana laughed before turning back to the pink-eyed girl. "If these boys give you any trouble, any at all, don't be afraid to burn them. Oh, and I've left a complete collection of Icha in your room for when you get too bored. I know how much you enjoyed it on our way back to Konoha, so I got you your own set. Word of advice though, the books are somewhat waterproof, for obvious reason, so I would suggest reading them in the onsen, saves you needing to wash the sheets too often," she explained cheerfully. By this point in time, Naruto had frozen midway through his ramen, his face practically glowing bright red in embarrassment. Izo had a particularly perverted grin on his face, and Kurotsuchi was blushing just as badly as Naruto. The fact that she actually liked those books was supposed to be a secret between her and the Anbu woman, not something to be told to the two teenage boys that she was being forced to live with for who knows how long. If she wasn't so determined to gather information to somehow report back to Iwa, she would have probably tried to kill herself at that very moment. Kana giggled at the three's reactions as she walked out of the room, waving them goodbye as she went. "I'm off boys. Take care, I'll see you in a while," she called out from down the hall. The teens remained frozen in their reactions until they heard the front door close and lock itself behind the woman. Naruto and Kurotsuchi let out deep breaths as soon as they were sure that Kana was definitely out of the mansion. Izo simply leant back into his chair, his perverted grin never once faltering in its intensity. Eventually Naruto's longing for Kana's special ramen won over his embarrassment, and he began to devour the deliciousness that it was. As it turned out, Kana had known Naruto's mother, and by extension, knew of the woman's special homemade ramen. It had proved to be the most effective bribery method one could use against the Jinchuriki. Unfortunately, for Kurotsuchi, she could not so easily distract herself from her embarrassment. Her face continued to maintain its perhaps not so healthy red glow as she tried to ignore Izo's grin, which was most definitely aimed at her. She was now stuck living with a definite pervert and a Jinchuriki with terrifying chakra reserves, the likes of which she had never felt before, both of whom now knew that she would more than likely be reading the Icha series in their onsen. If someone had have asked her what the most embarrassing thing that could happen to her was, this would not have even seemed like a possible answer. "So," Izo began slowly, "you like the Icha books too?" he asked curiously, his grin still etched on his features. She glared at him. "You heard nothing. You hear me?" "Nothing," she hissed quietly. I always did wonder why Kana had me put silencing seals in the onsen." "Now I know," Izo said with a shrug. Can't really blame her for it though. She did make a valid point about cleaning the bed sheets too often. I suggest you listen to that one. Can you two please not talk about that stuff at the table? It's affecting my appetite, Naruto whined pathetically. Kurotsuchi turned her glare to the blonde. Forgive us, Lord Namikaze, she said with a sneer, disgust all but dripping from her words. Naruto smiled weakly. You figured it out, eh? Cool, I was kinda hoping you'd realize sooner rather than later. Makes things easier to manage and gives you more time to cope with it. I really don't want you going back to Iwa and killing yourself too quickly just because you felt you needed to tell someone about who I am. The girl continued to glare at him. How does Iwa, or anyone for that matter, not know who you are? Shouldn't the village be groveling at your very feet for being the only son of their beloved Yondaime? She asked. The blonde chuckled mirthlessly. You would think that, wouldn't you? Nope, I get no form of hero worship whatsoever, quite the opposite actually. Since I have the QB sealed in me, most of the village sees me as the reason for my father's death, and they have attempted to get vengeance a few times. Nothing too serious, just a beating or two here and there, maybe a broken bone or something, but they never went very far until my 7th birthday. Got my skull cracked in 3 places and a kunai through one of my kidneys. Overall, that was the worst I ever got it, he explained far too casually. As far as my lineage goes, it's actually a pretty well-kept secret that is only known by a few in the village. Not that it's very difficult for someone to figure out, as you have just proven. Seriously, it amazes me sometimes how blind people can be just because they hate something. Anyway, that all stopped a while back since I literally disappeared from the public. They couldn't do anything if they couldn't find me, right? He said with a chuckle. During the younger boy's explanation, Izo had somehow managed to entertain himself using nothing more than a spoon and some chopsticks, making the eating utensils float above the table as he pushed them around in the appropriately dubbed breakfast belly. Neither of the room's other occupants paid much attention to the older boy's antics, although Kurotsuchi had taken a brief moment to wonder exactly how he was making the objects float. Fortunately, the Iwakunoichi's thoughts were more focused on their blonde Jinchuriki. So your own village hates you for something you couldn't control, even though, by all rights, they should be worshipping the very ground you walk on. Must really suck to be you, she replied with a cruel smirk. There would be many people in Iwa who would love to hear about the mistreatment of the Yellow Flash's legacy. Hell, some might even feel bad about it. To hear that the son of your greatest enemy was being treated like trash could easily be seen as an insult, almost as if Konoha was saying that Iwa was completely humiliated by a man who meant very little to them. Of course, the Iwa Council would simply see it as an opportunity to possibly bribe the boy over to their side, although from what Kurotsuchi had seen, she highly doubted the boy would leave the village. Naruto, being the dense, idiotic, and extremely unpredictable boy he was, grinned at the girl. Yeah, that pretty much sums up my life. I don't know how things are going to turn out now that everyone knows I'm a Jinchuriki, but I'm not stupid enough to think it's gonna be all happy-go-lucky. As it is, most of the villagers wouldn't even believe that I was the Yondaime's son. Kurotsuchi stared at him curiously. I don't get it. Couldn't you just show off the Hiraishin, or do a blood test to prove it? She asked. Probably, but they would just say that the fox is controlling me and is making a mockery of the Hokage. It really wouldn't surprise me if they declared me a threat to the village if I showed them that I can use the Hiraishin, maybe even put me in the bingo book if they were feeling especially stupid, he said nonchalantly. The black-haired girl simply deadpanned. Your village is retarded. Not even Iwa would do something so utterly ridiculous, and we have guys that would probably blow up our entire village just for a laugh. I do hope your Hokage isn't as much of a pushover as he looks, otherwise this place is royally fucked should another war break out at this. Izo decided to make himself known as he laughed quite loudly. That old geezer is a lot tougher than almost anyone would guess just by looking at him. Although it would be almost laughably easy for someone to take him down, should that someone just so happen to be a sexy, voluptuous, and highly deadly kunoichi dressed in a form-fitting outfit. Trust me, a woman with that description could take down 4 of the 5 great shinobi villages with very little trouble, the blindfolded teen explained, chuckling the whole time. Kurotsuchi narrowed her eyes. Why only 4? She asked curiously. Izo shuddered. Kirigakure has a last line of defense that no sane person would go up against. Their new Mizukage is one deadly bitch, both in skill and looks. I'm quite sure that most of the other Kage would be too busy drooling over her should an inter-village war ever break out. And I would not blame them at all. Well, it's good to see that a woman proved that they are strong enough to be a Kage. I was starting to get really sick of hearing about only men being the Kage of villages, the girl said with a slight grin. If you ever meet her, I dare you to tell her that. She will probably force you to be her apprentice or something crazy like that, since she also has the Yotan. Not that we would ever let that woman corrupt a girl in any way. There are enough incredibly powerful and sexy kunoichi in the world as it is, we do not need any more lest the balance of power be disrupted, Naruto stated calmly. Yeah. Balance of power, Izo drawled, making quotation signs with his fingers for the word balance. There's no balance of power between men and women. All a kunoichi has to do is accidentally get her clothes torn up a bit too much and any guy she's fighting will lose without even realizing it. A truly despicable technique, Kurotsuchi snorted. What kind of self-respecting woman would do such a thing just to win a fight? Naruto and Izo deadpanned at the girl. Shinobi and kunoichi alike are well known for using anything at their disposal to get a job done. Murder, blackmail, generally underhanded tactics, it's all fair game in the shinobi world, as is random nudity and the occasional using of one's body. It's all just part of the trade. Honestly though, you can't expect me to believe that kunoichi don't want us to ogle them when so many go out of their way to wear such form-fitting outfits, Izo reasoned casually. It's for comfort and offers better range of movement. Kurotsuchi retorted hastily. Yeah, and I only made my sexy jutsu to defeat perverts, Naruto replied sarcastically. Admit it, everyone has an ulterior motive when they do things like that. The blonde paused suddenly when he realized that not only was Kurotsuchi staring at him in confusion, but Izo was looking at him expectantly. What? Sexy jutsu? The girl asked curiously. Ulterior motive? Izo questioned in an almost serious tone. Almost. Naruto instantly gained a blank expression. You heard nothing, he said emotionlessly. An awkward silence fell upon the three teens as they all stared at their food. Well, Kurotsuchi was at least. Naruto had already gone back to inhaling his ramen while Izo simply. Actually, the Iwa kunoichi couldn't really figure out what he was doing. He could have been staring at the food, he might be sleeping while sitting up, hell, he could even be raping her with his eyes, if he had any. That was. The latter of those possibilities was probably just her being pessimistic, but that didn't mean she wasn't going to be prepared for the worst. She was suddenly caught off guard as Izo dropped forward and slammed his head on the table, breaking the plate in front of him and squishing the piece of raw meat on it. Why he had a piece of raw meat for breakfast, she did not know. What she did know, however, was that Izo was most definitely out cold, and Naruto looked far too pleased about it. That is what happens when you hit me with a frying pan. Asshole, the blonde muttered as he reached over and removed a small ceiling tag from Izo's arm. You knocked him out because he hit you with a frying pan? Isn't that a little excessive? Kurotsuchi asked unsurely. You would think so, but if I don't do it this way he won't learn his lesson. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have to go and meet up with our team. Being a Jinan sucks at times, Naruto mumbled the last part. Kurotsuchi's eyes widened comically. You two are Jinan? She yelled indignantly. I was beaten and taken prisoner by freaking Jinan. Naruto stared at her blankly. We are Jinan officially. Unofficially, we are. Well, I'm not exactly certain of what we are unofficially, but it's important. Anyway, if you want, I can show you where the onsen is before I leave and show you how to use the silencing seal, he offered calmly. The girl blushed lightly and glared at him. I'll be fine, pervert, she growled. Suit yourself. Word of warning though, Izo can get into any part of this house no matter how tightly you seal it, so don't assume that the onsen is as private as you expect, the blonde warned, grinning like an idiot the whole time. With that thought now firmly planted in the girl's head, there was no way Izo would be able to do anything without warranting suspicion. With that said, Naruto casually grabbed Izo by his shirt and started dragging him away, waving goodbye to the girl as he went. He had only used a low-powered tag so the older boy should wake up within half an hour, maybe. If not, he could always string him up like a punching bag and practice some jutsu. He still needed to master some of his more small-scale wind techniques after all. Kurotsuchi waited patiently until she heard the door close and lock itself before making a mad dash to her room. It was incredibly difficult to think of herself as a prisoner when she actually took the time to look at the living quarters they had given her, along with the amount of freedom they had allowed within the compound. If anything, it seemed more like a restricted vacation. A disturbing and eventually horrible ending vacation, but a vacation nonetheless. The fact that Kana had gotten her own Icha collection was merely icing on the cake. Now she at least had something to do while she waited for her grandfather to finally do something about her capture. With a gleeful squeal, which would forever go unknown by the rest of the world, she leapt onto the bed and instantly opened up one of the several books that had been neatly stacked on the mattress. A light pink coloring adorned her cheeks as she immersed herself into the perverted wonderland that was Icha. I can completely understand why Gramps has these books under his desk. Doesn't mean I won't still scream at him for reading them though, she giggled quietly. Naruto sighed as he once again waited patiently for Kakashi to arrive at the bridge, which was now the official meeting place for Team 7. Izo was sitting off to the side, giving the blonde the silent treatment, and his other two teammates were making a game of glaring at him spitefully and staring at him greedily. He briefly considered asking Izo or Kana to cast a genjutsu on the two of them that would make them fall head over heels for each other. But since Kana was out on a mission and Izo was more or less uncooperative, he was left with nothing. Sometimes he really wished he could use genjutsu. It had already been a week or so since the team started actually doing missions. He wasn't sure on the actual length of time due to the completely lackluster amount of attention he paid to the tasks, but he was sure it had been a week by now. If not, well, life wasn't all that important anyway. Kakashi's tardiness had become a blessing in disguise, even if he wouldn't admit it out loud, but in the end, it still boiled down to the team getting a chore of some sorts. Sakura was the only one who didn't mind the mind-numbing tasks, and she was, oddly enough, the only one who didn't have to do them. As soon as she hit that invisible brick wall called the "I can't do that cause it will mess up my looks" wall, Kakashi had seen it as a priority to take the pink head away from her teammates for some more private and exclusive training. Sasuke, as expected, was close to throwing a temper tantrum at being looked over for a civilian-born girl, while Naruto and Izo simply shrugged off the whole thing in understanding. It was obvious that Kakashi was trying to fix Sakura's fangirlish behavior, but it was also obvious that it was not working at all. If Naruto were to hazard a potentially dangerous guess, he would say that Sakura had accused Kakashi of trying to destroy her chances with Sasuke by making her change. The girl was adamant that Sasuke would come to admire her for her beauty and rescue her whenever she was in danger. On more than one occasion, both Naruto and Kakashi had to hold Izo back from trying to mutilate the girl. The blindfolded teen harbored a deeply rooted loathing for fangirls, borderline murderous if you were to ask a psychologist. Thankfully, Sasuke was making up for the girl's liking of well anything really. She didn't even look like she would have boobs at any point in her life, so she literally had nothing to offer at this point. The Uchiha was quite skilled for a Jonin and persistent too. He had the appropriate mind frame of getting the job done quickly so he could spend more time actually training. It didn't matter that he had to work with the two Uzumakis, so long as he got stronger in doing so. It was almost admirable how he could so easily overlook his own insecurities for the sake of gaining power, but it still wasn't healthy. "Yo!" Kakashi exclaimed cheerfully, once again appearing in a sunshine. At times, Naruto actually did wonder what Kakashi would do in the time before he met up with them. Izo had a theory, but they both hoped he was wrong in his assumption. Perhaps the man was just a late sleeper. Maybe he liked to spend a few hours making sure his hair was perfect, who knows. The important thing was that he wasn't simply wasting time with any of the female populace, cause if he was well Naruto would have lost a little bit of respect for the women of Konoha. "You're late, sensei," Sakura growled irritably. Apparently, she wasn't screeching like usual today. Something was definitely wrong in the universe. "Sorry about that. You know how difficult it is to navigate the road of life sometimes, one loses their way far too easily," the Jonin explained casually. "Does this road of life happen to pass by the red light district?" Izo asked curiously. Kakashi smiled at the boy. "Whatever do you mean?" he asked innocently. All four of the Jonin deadpanned at the man. "We aren't idiots, sensei," Naruto droned before glancing to Sakura and Sasuke. "At least I don't think we are," he mumbled quietly. Before Sakura could register what the blonde had said, Kakashi decided to interrupt. "Well guys, I have a great day planned for all of us. In fact, me and the other Jonin sensei have all been planning this for a while now," he explained much too happily. "This is so not going to end well," the Uzumakis thought in unison, not that they knew that of course. "What will we be doing, sensei? And what will it have to do with the other Jonin sensei?" Sakura asked with narrowed eyes. If they were going to do what she thought they were going to do, then it might cause problems. She didn't want to do anything involving Ino and Sasuke being too close together. "Well, as it just so happens, me and the other Jonin all agreed that it would be good for you guys to not only learn to work well with each other, but also the other Jonin teams from your class. Therefore, starting today, the teams will start spending at least one day a week training together. If you want, you can even ask the other Jonin for some training that they may specialize in that I might be unable to teach you," the silver-haired Cyclops replied. "Yeah, that's great and all, but I still don't like it," Izo muttered. "Can't we just do some actual missions already? You know, the ones that actually let us go outside the village?" Perhaps, but for today we're doing the team training. I'll meet you all at whatever training ground is in that direction," exclaimed cheerfully before vanishing in a sunshine. How does he not know what number the training ground is? And why does he always leave in a sunshine? Does he not realize that the road of life must be walked at a leisurely pace? Izo asked in complete seriousness, earning him some odd looks from his teammates. Such an amateur our sensei is, he mumbled before he too vanished in a sunshine. Naruto shrugged as he formed a hand seal and also vanished. Sakura fumed silently as she glared at the spot that Naruto had previously occupied. She didn't really understand her hatred for the Jinchuriki, but she was sure that it was justified somehow. Sasuke gave one of his signature unintelligible grunts as he walked in the direction that Kakashi had pointed. In the Jonin's defense, very few people actually knew the name or number for each of Konoha's numerous training grounds. As it was, only the more notorious or otherwise famous training grounds were actually well known. That still wouldn't help him find it though. The 4 Genin of Team 7 stared with wide eyes at the scene that was displayed before them, none of them blinking, or breathing for that matter. Not that they had control over themselves at the time. Not far from where they were standing, frozen to their spots, were the other Genin members of the other Genin teams from their class, or rather Sasuke and Sakura's class, since neither of the Uzumakis really attended the academy. The only oddity to their numbers were the 2 Genin from last year's Team 9, both of whom happened to be the only Genin not affected by the sight in front of them. The Jonin sensei, save for the sensei of Team 9, were all facing the complete other direction, all of them acting as if nothing was out of the norm. Kakashi was the most amused out of them, the silver-haired man almost cackling madly at the torture his Genin were being put through. Asuma was impassive to the situation, not being one to care all that much about what was happening so long as his team didn't break mentally. Kurenai was the most concerned of the three, the red-eyed woman hoping that Hinata was not too affected by what she was being put through, Kiba and Shino being not quite as important. Izo, being both blindfolded and incredibly resilient to almost all forms of genjutsu, didn't have the slightest clue what was going on. Despite his unknowing of the situation around him, the teen was still frozen in place, the sense of horror and youth? Yeah, youth. The sense of horror and youth serving to keep him stuck in place as he waited for something to happen. Hey, guys, what's going on? Izo asked curiously. So horribly beautiful, Naruto replied shakily. Such horrendous amounts of youth, I'll never sleep again. Sakura muttered fearfully. What is this? Such power, Sasuke said in terrified awe. Sorry about this, Guy-sensei and Lee tend to get a bit excited when it comes to training. The female member of Team 9 apologized. Izo, being the only Genin aside from the other member of Team 9 to still be somewhat unaffected by everything, turned and smiled at the girl. It's fine. Don't really know what it is, but it's fine. I think, he said cheerfully, completely disregarding the horror that his little brother was going through. Well, at least one of you hasn't gone brain dead, the girl said in relief before quickly smiling and putting her hand out in front of her. Hey, my name's Tenten, weapons mistress of Konoha, she exclaimed happily. Izo casually reached out and shook her hand, which he noted was not how most girls like to greet others. Hey, I'm Izo. The blonde idiot is my brother Naruto. I think you already know who the Uchiha is, and the pink one is Sakura, he greeted. Pausing slightly, the older teen grinned slightly. Weapons mistress? He asked curiously. Tenten blushed lightly. Yeah, it's more of a goal of mine than anything, she replied shyly. Quickly snapping herself out of her unusual shyness, the girl finally glanced down to observe the Chokudo-type sword that Izo had hanging from his waist with a keen and calculating eye. She had to admit that from what she could see, which wasn't very much, it was a top-quality sword. The hilt was oddly long for its overall length, the sheath was rather plain compared to the decorative styles that were annoyingly common amongst the better-made blades, and it was absolutely riddled with seals. Tenten decided right then and there that she had to wield the sword at least once, no matter the cost. While Tenten raped Izo's sword, said boy was making a general evaluation of her. He had to admit, the twin bun hairstyle, combined with the Chinese-style pink blouse and dark green pants, made for a rather cute appearance. She also gave off a definite tomboy vibe, which Izo could pick up even in her chakra, something which was kinda creepy. He was a very skilled censor, but when it came to emotions and personality stuff, Naruto was the go-to guy. The other, far more disturbing, thing that he discovered in his observation was that she had a small library of sealing scrolls hidden away in her weapons pouch and other various places on her person, all of which contained a small army's worth of weaponry. Nice sword, Tenten said, not taking her eyes off of the weapon. You're not too bad looking yourself, Izo replied with a smirk. The girl blushed brightly at that but still refused to take her eyes off of the sword as she stared longingly at it. If Izo were a lesser man, He would have actually feared the possibility of her trying to take his weapon from him forcibly. Luckily, or maybe not so luckily, there were fail-safes should someone try to steal his sword, not one of which was particularly pleasant to be on the receiving end of. Hopefully Tenten wasn't stupid enough to try anything, well, stupid. "Can I look at it?" she asked hopefully. "You're already looking at it," Izo said simply. Tenten glared at him with a pout, the action alone almost making Izo want to let her look at the sword. "Don't be smart with me. Can I hold it?" she asked a bit more forcefully. Izo actually gained a thoughtful expression as he hummed. "Can I kiss you?" he asked suddenly, eliciting an even brighter blush from the girl. What?" she stuttered out in embarrassment, ignoring the odd look that her teammate was giving her. "Why the hell are you asking me that?" she growled back. "I'll take that as a no then," the blindfolded teen said simply, getting a nod from Tenten. "Well, I'm sorry to say this, but it appears that we are both stuck merely observing what we want from a distance," he stated sadly. That did not help Tenten fight down the blush that threatened to light her up redder than a tomato as she glared at him angrily. "You could have just said no. There was no need to embarrass me like this," she said irritably. Izo grinned. "Actually, there is a perfectly good reason for me to embarrass you. Firstly, it allows me to gauge your reaction to being irritated by me. Secondly, people's chakra is much easier to read when they're experiencing a strong emotion. And thirdly, you're just so cute when you're all mad and blushing. You are so lucky I have restraint or else I would hug you," he explained cheerfully. That was the final straw for the bun-haired girl as her blush finally reached its peak in both fierceness and brightness. With an annoyed huff, she spun on her heels and stomped away from Izo, who was still grinning like an idiot. He did so love turning the tables on girls like that. What could they do to an openly perverted teenager who was not only blind but also did nothing but compliment them? Absolutely fucking nothing. Then again, it wasn't exactly a foolproof method, and he himself had been on the bad side of a failed attempt. In reality, complimenting girls could go one of two ways: either they blush, thinking that it was sweet, or they would think that it was a scheme to make them sleep with him, in which case he would get the ever-living shit kicked out of him. Thankfully, Tenten had been the former of the two, cause he really didn't want to know how creative she could get with those weapons she had. "You just can't help yourself, can you?" Naruto asked lazily from behind him. Izo shrugged. "What can I say, the cute ones just call out to me," he replied with a content sigh. "You have some serious problems," the blonde droned bluntly. The older teen nodded in agreement, not even bothering to deny anything. "Hey, what exactly is everyone staring at? No one has moved aside from me and Tenten for the past like 3 minutes, he asked curiously. "Ever seen a grown man and a boy, both wearing green jumpsuits, with bowl-cut hairstyles and the thickest eyebrows humanly possible, hug? You know, tears in the eyes, shining grins, youthful manly bonding kind of thing, giant sunset genjutsu blaring behind them that can't even be broken with Kyuubi's chakra," the Jinchuriki said emotionlessly. No. I can't say I've seen anything like that before, or really anything else either, but that's different," Izo said casually. Naruto frowned. "Lucky you," he mumbled. "Okay guy, Lee, you can stop the hugging now. I'm fairly certain that the children have suffered enough for one day," Kurenai said calmly. Guy and Lee instantly stopped hugging, canceling the sunset genjutsu of youth as they did so, before both striking an identical good guy pose. "Forgive us Kurenai-san, we were merely fanning our flames of youth before this most youthful training session," the two green-clad males yelled enthusiastically. Everyone who knew Guy before this event sighed, while those who had only just been introduced to the concept of youth simply stared at the two shinobi with wide fearful eyes. Unknown to them, their minds were already working in overdrive to store this feeling into their very genetic code, ensuring that future generations had the subconscious instinct to run away from similar situations. Kami knows they will need it. Unfortunately though, the painful introductions didn't end there. Actually, they only got worse. As soon as everyone was finally over the man-hug of doom, they all realized that Naruto and Izo were among them. The reactions of everyone varied, but the differences weren't all that extreme. The Jonin of the group simply stared at the boys in a form of general acknowledgement, Guy being unique and offering the two a grin and a thumbs up. The Jonin simply stared at the boys either impassively or irritably. Much like his sensei, Lee was an oddity in the fact that he decided to copy the man's actions of grinning and giving them a thumbs up. After several seconds of awkward silence, Izo suddenly found that a very, very far away ant was incredibly interesting, to the point where he completely ignored everyone else and walked aimlessly in an apparently random direction. Had he have been paying attention, he would have been saddened by the complete lack of attention he was getting. It seemed that the people of Konoha really did care more about a stupid fox made of chakra than him, an oddity of nature itself and an unbiological spawn of the most sadistic missing nin from Konoha. Apparently the only way to get respected or feared in a ninja village was to blow shit up with ridiculously flashy jutsu, truly a sad development in a job that focused on being hidden. Naruto watched as his brother wandered away aimlessly, probably found a butterfly or something. Sometimes the older teen's rapidly declining mental stability was concerning to the blonde, more for the fact that he worried what could be done should the blindfolded boy actually get his hands on a butterfly. The whole concept of the butterfly effect was far too, let's say, open for suggestion. A theory based on time-space distortion and a harmless insect, combined with an insane seal master, was a perfect recipe for chaos. A truly retarded person might even try to add coconut to the mix for consistency. The Jinchuriki shuddered mentally at the thought of such a despicable person actually existing. Meanwhile, back at the Namikaze estate, locked away in her room, a particularly happy and blushing Red Kurotsuchi sneezed quite suddenly. Putting down the small book that she had been reading, the girl glanced around curiously before shrugging lazily and returning to the wondrous world of erotica literature. She would look into the random sneeze at a later date. Maybe after another chapter or two. Perhaps she could just forget about it entirely and maintain her ignorance of the world for several more hours. It wasn't as if she was going anywhere anytime soon. Kurenai, for some unknown reason other than the fact that she was the only mature female of the entire group, was the first to sigh in irritation at everyone's lack of anything. No one was moving, aside from Izo of course, but he was not of immediate concern. So far, all of the Jonan had simply been staring at Naruto, who had returned the stares in a bored if not unimpressed manner. The older Kunoichi was tempted, almost, to put everyone in a genjutsu just to elicit some form of interaction. "Can someone please say something before I hit Kakashi for being a pervert?" the woman said tiredly. Said Cyclops gasped in horror and stared wide-eyed at the red-eyed woman before letting his shoulders slump in defeat. There were literally no words in any known language that could deter a female from doing something she had her mind set to. It was almost a commendable trait for them to have, if only it weren't so utterly terrifying. Asuma patted his fellow Jonin on the back in an attempt to calm the sulking man down slightly. It did not work. "What should we say?" Kiba asked. Unknown to most, this would be the most intelligent thing he would say for a while. Shikamaru sighed. "Maybe a simple hello would suffice," he suggested in a bored tone. "We are way past hello. We passed that the moment you guys all decided to stare at me like I wasn't all human," Naruto stated, bluntly. Are you all human?" Ino asked dumbly. Shikamaru and Choji both face-bombed at that and tried to act like they didn't know the Yamanaka air. Ino. That was the single stupidest thing I've ever heard spoken by well anyone really. Oddly enough, this comment was made by Sakura of all people. "I know, weird isn't it? Well, sorry for actually being worried about standing in front of a baijuo. Not all of us can hide behind a giant shield like you, billboard brow." The blonde girl exclaimed irritably. "Wanna say that again, Ino pig?" The pinkette growled angrily. Without any form of warning, Izo suddenly appeared from wherever he had wandered off to, and smashed a frying pan over Sakura's head. Everyone just stared at the boy with wide eyes as he observed the frying pan in unconcealed shock before looking around as if he had no idea how it got there in the first place. Had anyone have been paying attention to the frying pan itself, they might have noticed that it had disappeared almost as suddenly as it had appeared. "Okay people, I don't know who summoned me, but don't do it again," Izo stated sternly before simply running off in a completely different, yet still random, direction than he had before. After several more seconds of silence, during which Sakura finally realized what happened, Shikamaru decided to ask the one question that was on everyone's mind. "Is he all human?" the Nara asked curiously. Naruto chuckled nervously and scratched the back of his head. "We aren't entirely sure. It's more of a guessing game when it comes to him," he replied. "Alrighty then. Let's get this group training session underway so I can finally get back to reading my book," Kakashi said cheerfully. "Since this is the first day, there won't be anything too big like switching teammates and having an all-out brawl, but there will be fighting. For today, you guys are simply required to remain in your set teams and have a spar with another team's sensei. This will allow us to gauge the strong points and weaknesses of each team from different points of view, while also allowing us to see if any of you would be well suited for something one of us specializes in," the Cyclops explained. "Basically, this session will just be us figuring out which of you would be better off learning from one of us exclusively during future sessions. It would be a hindrance if you were simply expected to learn from me, a genjutsu specialist, when you are better off learning from Kakashi, an ninjutsu specialist," Kurenai elaborated. "Do we get to choose which one of you we train under?" Shikamaru asked. Honestly, he just wanted to make sure he didn't end up with Guy training him. Well, I don't really see why not. It is your choice as to what you plan to learn from us, we will just tell you which of us will be the better option. In the end, this is nothing more than specialization training, so you don't really have to train under any of us. If you have other interests that require your attention, then you are free to go about them, so long as you aren't using the time to laze around, Kakashi said with an eye smile aimed at the lazy Nara. Tenten, who was still blushing lightly from her interaction with Izo, raised her hand. Can we stay here but still do our own training, perhaps even get some of the others to help out? She asked curiously, her dark brown eyes glancing dangerously towards where Izo had gone. A most youthful idea, Tenten. I am sure that such a method can be arranged, Guy exclaimed happily. The weapon's mistress-to-be glanced over to Kurenai, who in turn giggled lightly. Yes, Tenten, that should be fine, the red-eyed woman assured her. It didn't take very long for everyone to realize that Neji, the third member of Team 9, had disappeared, much to Tenten's dislike. Izo was still doing Kami knows what, most of the other Jonin were just maintaining the awkwardness, and Naruto was just waiting for someone to say something about the Kyuubi. In the end, no one actually said anything while Kakashi started to randomly place the teams with different sensei for the day. Team 9's 2 remaining members got paired with Kakashi, Team 10 got paired with Kurenai, Team 8 got paired with Guy, and Team 7's 4 members got paired with Asuma. Asuma just stared at the Jonin standing before him as the other teams all went off for their own individual sparring session. He made a quick assessment of the group and came to a rather dull conclusion. Obviously, Sasuke and Naruto were the frontline fighters of the squad. Izo was more of a mystery compared to the others, but he guessed that the boy was the infiltration and assassination one of the 4. Sakura was much the same as Ino, fangirlish and otherwise not useful in a practical sense. This is going to be a drag, isn't it? The smoking Jonin asked in a very Shikamaru fashion. More than likely, Naruto and Izo said in unison, earning weird looks from the other 3 people present. The Sarutobi sighed as he lazily fell into a taijutsu stance. May as well get this over with. Come at me with everything you got and you might stand a chance, Asuma said tiredly. As expected, Sasuke charged forward straight away. Naruto shrugged and went around to flank the Jonin. Sakura simply pulled out a kunai and stood there, and Izo faded out of existence completely. Asuma rolled his eyes at the complete lack of actual teamwork between them. Sasuke was going to get himself killed if he just charged headfirst into a fight. Naruto was at least trying to work with what was going on. Izo was still a mystery card, and Sakura was completely useless. Yep, this team was screwed. How Kakashi saw any reason to pass these guys was beyond him. Oh well, not my problem, he thought as he lazily blocked the first strike of Sasuke's attempted onslaught. Hiruzen was not particularly happy at the moment. At first, it had been due to the fact that his old and apparently wise teammates had honored him with their presence. The 2 elders had once again tried to convince him to disband Team 7 and place Sasuke under Kakashi's tutelage exclusively. They had been trying it for the past week, each new day bringing a new and completely useless attempt to make him see the light. He had been tempted, oh so very tempted, to kill them out of boredom. Their latest attempt involved voicing their concern about having the last loyal Uchiha in the presence of both the Kyuubi Jinchuriki and what they dubbed the Abomination. The Hokage idly wondered what Izo's response would have been to being called an abomination, but he quickly realized that the boy would probably just laugh and demand they use that for his bingo book entry. He also wondered how the elders would react if they learned about Naruto and Izo having been en route for the past several of years, or that the boys actually had bingo book entries in the Land of Water. Sarutobi would pay good money to watch his teammates suffer a heart attack from such a revelation. Anyway, the new cause for his lack of positive emotions was sitting on his desk in the form of a recon report from one of Danzo's root squads. As it turned out, Takigakure was being less than kind to its resident Jinchuriki. In reality, such treatment of the Baijuu containers was not uncommon, but since the Nanabi was a gift to Taki from Konoha, it could be interpreted as blatant disrespect. That was how Danzo had put it anyway, and the old warhawk was disturbingly correct. If any of the other villages saw how Taki treated their gift, it could deal a notable blow to Konoha's reputation. So now, Hiruzen was left with a choice. He could either send a team to escort the Jinchuriki to Konoha and keep it safe whilst simultaneously increasing Konoha's military might, or he could simply leave it be and suffer the guilt of knowing that he could have done something for an unfortunate child but didn't. The choice was obvious, of course, but as Hokage, he still needed to factor in the bad results of both choices. If he left the Jinchuriki there, he would be knowingly condemning the child to a life of isolation and suffering, but if he sent a team to bring them back, He would be drawing unneeded attention to Konoha as a whole. When the other hidden villages learned about Konoha taking a Jinchuriki by force, there would be an uproar about Konoha preparing to take action against one of them. Kirigakure would be understanding after the help they offered during their civil war. Sina were their allies, so there wasn't much to worry about, but Iwakuma would probably have something to say about it. It was actually kind of funny considering that those two villages already possessed 2 Jinchuriki each, therefore Konoha having 2 as well shouldn't have been that big of a deal. Then there was also the fact that many of the smaller villages would feel threatened by Konoha after it just up-and took away the property of another. Now all that was left was figuring out which team he was sending to bring back the Jinchuriki, not that it was a very difficult choice to begin with. Who better to send than someone who can relate to the target, who can more than likely convince the target to go with him without resorting to violence. Naruto's ability to worm his way into people's hearts was truly a power to fear. And, if things got out of control, Izo would be there to utterly crush the Jinchuriki and bring him or her back without any further issues. One of the many benefits of having someone who is well trained in combating Jinchuriki. It was also worth noting that Team 7 really needed some out-of-the-village experience. More than a few people were putting their hopes into the last Uchiha, and even more wanted the boy to be well trained so as to properly represent the strength of the village. A mission to another village would do the team good, whilst also putting Naruto and Izo exactly where he needed them to be. The only thing he needed now was an excuse to actually send the team to Takigakure without raising suspicion. Now that I think about it, there aren't any substantial trading agreements between Konoha and Taki. Perhaps I could arrange a meeting with the village leader and send the team as my delegates. I could easily pass it off as giving the Uchiha some political experience for when he as a clan had the aging Hokage thought. It was true, unfortunately, that Konoha and Taki really didn't have any set-in-stone trading agreements between them. Although it was mainly due to Taki being far too secretive and reclusive, making things difficult when working with them. The old man chuckled evilly. The boys are going to either love or absolutely hate this mission. Thank Kamikana gave me the appropriate blackmail to use against them in case of an emergency, he said with a mischievous smirk. Naruto would most likely kill him if he learned about the information the Sarutobi had on the blonde, Izo too he supposed, but the older teen was far too difficult to predict. With another evil chuckle, the aging Sarutobi pulled out a blank scroll and began to write up a message to the ruler of Takigakure. He didn't really have time to ask permission for a meeting, so he was going to go with the simple show up with a letter from a Kage approach. Taki would have to be foolish to refuse a meeting with delegates from Konoha, and so long as Kakashi kept his team in line everything would appear unsuspicious. Hiruzen snapped his fingers, eliciting one of the Anbu in his office to appear in front of him. I want you to get me Kakashi and his Junon team. Bring them all here as soon as possible and warn Kakashi that his tardiness will not be appreciated on this matter, he ordered calmly, receiving a nod from the Anbu before they disappeared. The Hokage sighed and leant back in his chair for the umpteenth time in who knows how long. Things were starting to get a little bit more complicated now, what with the sudden activity of a few of the known Jinchuriki. The Chunin exam seemed to be an upcoming focal point for an apparent reunion of the Baijuo, not that he would stop it. Who knew, maybe the chaos caused would give him the perfect chance to bring some of his more radical plans to fruition. It was all just a matter of time now. In a large dark room, 7 somewhat holographic figures stood upon weird wooden-like pillars that seemingly emerged straight from the darkness below them. 5 of the 7 figures all turned to look at the other 2 figures, one of which possessed odd ripple pattern eyes and emanated an aura of power. Standing next to him was a stoic-looking woman with a flower in her hair. The holographic forms of each individual didn't show color all too well, leaving the figures dull and flickering randomly. What news is there on the Jinchuriki? The man with the ripple-patterned eyes asked calmly. The Ichibi is still within Sunagakure, the Nibi and Hichibi are still within Kumagakure. The Rakubi has returned to Kirigakure, but we are still unsure as to the location of the Sanbi. We are not even sure if it is still even sealed or if it has yet to reform. The Ibi and Gobi are still somewhere within Earth Country, and the Nanabi is still being held in Takigakure. The shortest and hunchbacked-looking member of the group replied with a gruff voice. And what of the Kyubi? Have we located its Jinchuriki? The obvious leader asked. It seems that the Hokage has released the identity of the Kyubi Jinchuriki to the public. It is being held within a boy, Naruto Uzumaki, who is currently of Junon rank. Knowing the Hokage, I would suspect that he would not so carelessly release such information without taking worst-case scenarios into account. It would not be wise to make any immediate move against the boy, one of the shorter members explained emotionlessly. The leader nodded slightly. The Kyubi is the last of the 9 Baijuo we require. I too do not feel comfortable with the Hokage's actions, therefore we will use our time gathering the others to also keep an eye on Konoha and hopefully figure out what exactly they are playing at. The rest of you will continue with your current tasks while I find more capable members to bolster our numbers, the man explained calmly. Everyone nodded before phasing out of existence. The leader opened his eyes lazily, revealing that he was looking out over a large city curtained by endless rain. Water soaked through his orange hair and his long black cloak, but not a drop interrupted the emotionless gaze of his ripple-patterned purple eyes. The numerous piercings that adorned his face and arms glistened slightly in the rain. Had it not been for the high collar of his cloak, one would have seen the frown etched on his features. Behind him stood the woman from the meeting he had just left, her short, straight blue hair not at all touched by the cascading droplets of water as she stood far enough away from the ledge that the leader was standing on. Her amber eyes stared emotionlessly towards the distance, as if searching for something beyond the dark clouded sky. A simple black labret piercing, not unlike those that covered the leader, was the only thing that marred her otherwise immaculate features. Her eyes suddenly gained a flicker of concern as she turned her attention to the man standing before her. Pain, that boy, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, his name. She started to say. I know, Konan Pain interrupted before looking up to the sky. Another Uzumaki. I had assumed that we had all been wiped out, he said in an almost sad tone. What do you intend to do now? Will this alter the plan? Konan asked. We have already come too far to let such a trivial matter interrupt with our plans. The boy will be captured, and the Kyuubi will be sealed. However, should he show interest in our cause, then his death might be but a brief experience, Pain replied. Konan's eyes actually widened slightly, not enough to be easily noticed, but enough to be highly noted when it came to the otherwise emotionless woman. You would use that for him? She asked in the closest thing to surprise she could manage. Perhaps, he answered simply. It depends on the circumstances at the time and the level of his cooperation. But either way, we will obtain the Kyuubi, the easy way or the hard way. I suggest you retire for the night. You have helped me enough for today. Konan nodded slightly before exiting the room and leaving Pain on his own. The orange-haired man once again looked up to the dreary sky, the same sky that refused to halt its endless tears for reasons unknown to most. But Pain knew. He knew why the sky cried as it did, and he was still working tirelessly to end the suffering, to bring peace to the world. If only there were more who could see things through his eyes and understand his goals, but he figured it would be difficult for mortals to see through the eyes of a god. In the end, it was up to him to fix the world, even if it didn't want to be fixed. Naruto Uzumaki, he mumbled quietly. I wonder if you two strive for peace. Would you be willing to aid me in such a cause, or are you merely another of those who blindly contribute to the suffering and destruction of the world? I guess only time will tell, he said before he too walked away from the ledge on which he stood and left the room, intending to retire for the night himself. The world would see peace, even if he had to destroy it to obtain it. And that, my dear friends, is why the dingo is clearly the better option in any given circumstance, Izo exclaimed far too cheerfully. Naruto groaned and hung his head in shame as he walked as far away from his brother as he could. Kakashi was simply ignoring everything in favor of his book, a few quiet yet perverted giggles escaping the jonin every now and then. Sasuke, being the queen, yes, queen, of Emos, was able to simply grunt at the older boy's statement before returning to seeing the world as nothing more than a hindrance. Unfortunately, the pink-haired member of the team was more curious and open when it came to things she didn't really know about. The thirst for knowledge in any form was a dangerous game to play. So it came as little surprise when the girl raised her hand questioningly as if in a classroom. Can I ask something? She asked, stupidly rendering her question redundant. Izo, being in his early mission cheerfulness, decided to indulge the girl. Sure. Any and all questions regarding the awesomeness that our dingoes are much appreciated, he replied happily. Sakura frowned as she fought down the desire to punch the older teen. She may have been stubborn, and she may have had anger management issues, but she wasn't so stupid as to not acknowledge when she was hilariously outmatched. There was just something about Izo that made her feel as if he would not hesitate to pummel her into the ground if she tried to hit him. The fact that he had hit her with a frying pan had also added to this assumption. The pinkhead quickly calmed herself. What exactly is a dingo? She asked curiously. To be perfectly fair, no one else aside from the blindfolded boy had any real idea as to what the creature was. It was safe to assume that it didn't actually exist naturally within the elemental nations, but then again, it could have also been a unique summons clan. Of course, that just raised even more, slightly concerning questions, like how Izo knew about an otherwise unknown summons clan, and why he was so fanatically devoted to praising them. The elder Uzumaki sibling gasped in mock horror and pointed accusingly at the Haruno. "You dare not know of the dingo? Thou shalt burn for such heinous ignorance," he hissed angrily before literally phasing out of existence, which was becoming a common thing for him to do recently. Naruto rolled his eyes. "Don't worry, he's just saying that. You won't actually burn. I think," the blonde said tiredly. Sakura smiled nervously and nodded before distracting herself with the passing by scenery. Sasuke was also observing the new environment with a keen eye, this being his first time out of the village, but he was far more interested in how Izo had vanished. Kakashi was also quite curious about the boy's strange ability, although being a Jonin meant he also held a concerned respect for the technique as well. Being able to vanish completely, to the point of being undetectable, was a truly astonishing accomplishment. The Jinchuriki of the group sighed mentally. As of the moment, the Junon team was slowly making their way towards Takigakure. The reason they were going so slow was because neither Sasuke nor Sakura could tree walk, therefore making traveling through the trees impossible. It was concerning that Kakashi had yet to teach either of the Junon that particular skill, but he decided against getting involved. So long as the Cyclops didn't bother him, he wouldn't bother the Cyclops. Naruto could tell that Izo had made a mad dash towards their ultimate destination, probably to make a quick evaluation of things before their arrival was officially announced. It also didn't help that the group was being followed, whoever it was were far enough away so as to remain hidden from Kakashi, but the blonde's negative emotion sensing could reach a very impressive distance. At least one of their followers was feeling strangely bloodthirsty towards them. This mission, despite its perceived ease and simplicity, was already well on its way to not ending well. Takigakure was not the most hospitable of villages, and they were known for being unhealthily reclusive and secretive. At least Naruto and Izo had been informed of the real reasons behind this mission, even if they weren't very pleased with it. He could honestly say that he would have taken it way worse had he not been told of things beforehand, possibly to the point of killing some people. Either way, a secret mission to bring back a Jinchuriki was not an easy feat, even with Naruto on board. As it was, Konoha, and by extension him, did not have anywhere near a decent amount of information on the current Jinchuriki of the Nanabi. This meant that he, or more specifically Izo, would have to track the person down before they could even begin to make a plan for persuading them to go to Konoha. Dealing with Jinchuriki was a tricky business. Well, that's how history always portrayed it anyway. They were more often than not extremely isolated and rather hostile people to their treatment, and when that was combined with the truly humbling power of a Baijuo, it was about as dangerous as spitting on a cage. It didn't help that only he and Izo actually knew what was going to happen in Taki, the Hokage deeming the whole situation as a need-to-know thing. Unless shit really hit the fan, Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura would all have to remain clueless. Even if things did go too far, Naruto would only let Kakashi in on things. He simply couldn't trust either of the two actual Junon to act accordingly to the situation. Anyway, the team was closing in on their destination, slowly mind you, and it wouldn't be long before they were stuck dealing with the political backlash of just showing up without warning. Naruto wouldn't have to do anything when it came to that stuff though, which left him with free time to snoop around a bit. There were some benefits to being Junon after all. "This is Takigakure?" Sakura asked in awe. The four present members of the group all stared up at the colossal waterfall that cascaded down in front of one of the largest cliff faces they had seen. The village definitely lived up to its name. Kakashi and Naruto were noticeably less awed by the sight, but such a thing was to be expected given their previous experience with things outside of Konoha. "You know, this village boasts that it has never been, nor could it ever be, invaded," Kakashi lectured casually. "No one outside of those in the village itself knows how to get in, and aside from trying to climb the cliff, well, there aren't very many other viable options to enter the village. Bet you 5,000 Ryo that you could cut that waterfall," Izo said to Naruto cheerfully. "And I bet myself 10,000 Ryo that I could totally invade this place. With the right incentive of course. And perhaps a baby panda." He mumbled the last part thoughtfully. "What would you need the panda for?" Naruto asked curiously, not at all surprised by his brother's sudden reappearance. Izo gave the blonde a look that could pass for "Are you seriously asking me that?" look, if he wasn't blindfolded. "Naruto, once you finally grow up and learn to understand how the world works, you'll figure out that there is very little that people will do to stop you when you are holding a baby panda," he said sagely. Naruto deadpanned. "You just want a baby panda, don't you?" he said emotionlessly. "I really do." "Kakashi-sensei, how are we supposed to get in if we don't know where the entrance is?" Sakura asked curiously. "Ah, good question, Sakura. I'm afraid that we will have to wait for someone to exit the village and run into us, Although I don't really know how long that will take, the Jonin answered with an eye smile. Sakura appeared to be a bit irritated by that answer, as did Sasuke. Naruto, however, sighed and turned to a grinning Izo. How many, how long? He asked lazily. 6 of them, all circled around us, since the moment you 4 arrived, the older teen answered. 2 of them are around Chunin level, 1 has Jonin reserves, and the other 3 are Jonin at best. Kakashi peered lazily over his book. Having a censor on the team always ruins the surprise, he said downheartedly. Before Sakura could ask what the man was talking about, 6 shinobi, all with taki headbands, surrounded them with kunai drawn. Izo actually took a brief moment to wonder why everyone always seemed to pull out a kunai first. All it did was bring some amusement to the confrontation and it wasn't threatening at all. To a skilled ninja, it was the equivalent to threatening someone with a butter knife, a really, really sharp butter knife. Sure, it got the message across, but it was still lame as hell. What are you doing here, Konoha Shinobi? The Jonin level 1 of the group asked quickly. Although the man was addressing the group as a whole, his eyes never left Izo. Actually, most of the other Taki ninja were shooting the boy suspicious glances, probably all worried about how they couldn't sense the boy before he appeared, nor could they sense him now that he was there. Said blindfolded boy sighed at the attention he had gained. It was an unfortunate side effect of his abilities, but not all a bad thing. Being impossible to sense by normal means was a major bonus when it came to, well, anything that had to do with being a proper ninja. We have a message from the Hokage for your leader. We are acting as his delegates in this matter, Kakashi answered casually, throwing a small scroll to the obvious leader of the other group. The man caught the scroll and quickly opened it, giving its contents a brief glance. After a few seconds, the Taki ninja sighed and tossed the scroll back to Kakashi as he put his kunai away. The other shinobi all followed his example and let the tension in the air fade away, even if they continued to be wary of Izo. Naruto was thankful that, for once, the attention was not on him. After reading the short report from the root team that had been sent to assess Taki, he wasn't too sure he wanted them to know of his condition. The chances of the villagers treating him like they had their own Jinchuriki were awfully high, as would be Izo's murderous tendencies should they try anything. Did the Hokage not think to send a message beforehand to inform us, or rather ask us, about this meeting? Simply arriving here is not a very wise thing to do, the leader said disapprovingly. Kakashi simply smiled at the man. Yes, well, the Hokage figured that such an action between allies could be overlooked. He was also rather keen to find out how this meeting would go, so it would not be very polite to send us back with bad news, the Cyclops replied. Naruto blocked out the mind-numbing conversation about village protocols regarding visiting. It was basically just the Taki Jonin ranting calmly about how unorthodox it would be to simply let them into Takigakura without first consulting the village leader. Being told politely that you were not trusted was not something the blonde wanted to experience any more than he absolutely had to. So, with a bored gaze, he stared observingly at the massive waterfall and took his brother's bet into careful consideration. Yep, I could definitely cut that thing if I used enough chakra. Not that I'm going to though. The Taki guys here would probably try to kill me if they knew I could make a mockery of their famed landmark. Still, the extra money would be nice. Naruto was brought out of his musings as the Taki shinobi relented in their attempts to send the team away. Without any further words shared between them, the Konoha team followed the Taki group up to the waterfall, which obviously had something to do with entry into the village. Seriously, it was the village hidden by a waterfall. How much bigger of a hint does one need? Anyway, although they were hesitant, the shinobi eventually guided them through the waterfall and into the rather large tunnel behind it. All of the Konoha ninja had to give Taki credit for making use of such a unique entrance system, even if it was somewhat over the top. They were quickly led to the end of the tunnel where several pools of water were, each one extending deep into the ground and riddled with what appeared to be roots. Naruto, Izo, and Kakashi all took the hint and dived in with 3 of the Taki ninja, Sasuke and Sakura not being all too pleased with having to swim to the village, and liking having 3 personal watchdogs even less. They didn't say anything though, as that would only lead to more problems than they would already have within the village. The Hokage had told them about his wanting to have a better trading agreement with Taki, and also about how such a mission would be good experience for the Uchiha to better his political standing for the future. Since Sasuke was so arrogant, and Sakura was so pathetically willing to do anything to help her true love, neither of the two Jonin even questioned the mission. Thankfully, this also meant that they were both restricting themselves to their best behavior while in Taki, not that being overly pompous and thick-headed was likable behavior to begin with. With the gaining entry to the village problem was solved, the team and Taki shinobi all entered one of the pools of water and disappeared into the depths. Had any of them stayed a little longer, they would have seen another person enter the cave-like tunnel through the waterfall, along with 4 others that were following. The first to enter the tunnel wasted no time in walking up to the pools of water and observing his surroundings with an emotionless gaze. God damn it. Why the hell do they have to have their secret entrance behind a waterfall? It's so stupidly cliché and does nothing but make people wet, exclaimed the only female of the group as she angrily wringed the water out of her long reddish-pink hair and her plain black hat. Now, Tuya. A girl shouldn't speak so harshly, the largest of the 5 said calmly. Shut it, fatso. The now-named Tuya snapped irritably. He, you know, with how much you two argue, I'm amazed you aren't married yet, snickered one of the group who just so happened to have 6 arms. How about it, Jirobo, gonna try your luck at taming Tuya? He asked in amusement. Tuya turned and glared at the 6-armed boy. I dare you to say that one more bloody time, you spider freak. I'd like to see how funny you can be once I've ripped all your limbs off, she growled. Oh, so defensive, Tuya. Could it be that you were just trying to distract us from your budding relationship with poor Jirobo? Asked the 4th member of the group, who was not only extremely creepy looking, but also had a second head on his back that appeared to be asleep. Go fuck yourself, birdbrain. Surely your Kekkei Genkai will allow that, the redhead spat angrily. Enough. The 5th member said, somehow having an irritated edge to his voice while maintaining his emotionless. The 4 young shinobi, which their forehead protectors proudly stated, all froze and ended their dispute instantly. Not one of them wanted to incur the wrath of their leader, even if they outnumbered him. Arrogance and anger problems were no excuse for being suicidal, which was the literal outcome if they dared to disobey the older boy in front of them. Said older boy was staring at the 4 of them with disinterest and slight irritation, and all 4 of them knew why. In his eyes, not one of them was worthy of their master's kindness and generosity. They were too weak and useless to truly serve any meaningful purpose, and were not prepared to put their lives on the line for their master either. We are here on a mission, and you will act appropriately while we are here. I will not have any of you putting the success of this mission at risk for your own selfish reasons, nor will I tolerate you drawing any unnecessary attention to Otogakur, the albino boy droned. Do you understand? Yeah, it's cool. We'll behave, Sakon, the one with 2 heads, said, only the slight twitching of his lips indicating he was nervous. Tuya snorted. I don't see what's so important about one lost experiment. And the Jinchuriki too? What the hell is Lord Orochimaru going to do with these 2 that he can't do with someone? You know, easier to capture, she said irritably. It is not our place to question our master. All you need to know is that he requires those boys, and it is our job to bring them to him. Failure is not an option for this mission, the leader said. That's easy for you, Kimimaro. Not everyone is as blindly devoted as your Kidomaru, the 6-armed one, stated calmly. The albino narrowed his eyes dangerously at the spider-like boy. Then perhaps you have reached the end of your usefulness, he said coldly before he dived into the pool of water and began swimming towards the village. The 4 young ninja were silent for a few moments before Jirobo decided to sigh. Even I hate him sometimes, the large boy said tiredly. That attitude of his sure gets old really fast. Too bad we can't just kill him though. It would make things so much easier, Kidomaru muttered. Stop whinging, you idiots. Let's just go and capture those stupid morons and get this mission over and done with as soon as possible. Orochimaru said that Kimimaro was only accompanying us on this mission, so after it's done everything can go back to normal, Tuya said angrily. The 3, or rather 4, boys shrugged in response, all seeing the girl's logic. They all quickly followed Kimimaro's example and dived into the water, swimming after their oh-so-great leader. As soon as the cave was empty again, a section of air began to waver slightly before Izo phased into existence. The blindfolded boy, despite his usual cheerfully sarcastic demeanor, was smirking viciously as he took a few deep sniffs of the air, committing the 5 ninjas sent to memory. So, good old Orochimaru sent some little kiddies after me. How adorable, he said with a shark-like grin, reminiscent of a certain missing nin. I do so hate being underestimated. With a light sigh, the teen withdrew one of Naruto's personal Hiraishin kunai and threw it into the ceiling. Who knew how useful this spot could be for an escape route, or perhaps an ambush? With the kunai safely secured in the rock above, Izo started to slowly weave through a string of hand seals. As soon as he was finished, he flared his chakra slightly and placed his left hand to the ground. An endless, enormous, and extremely complex sealing array began to flow out of his palm and spread out across the entire cave floor. The sealing array suddenly stopped its advancement before glowing a bright purple and fading into the rock. Well, I hope they appreciate my little surprise when they get back here, he exclaimed cheerfully. Izo suddenly stumbled slightly and fell to his knees, panting and gasping for air. Bringing a shaky hand up to what would be his line of sight, he smirked angrily. "Kami, how pathetic," he growled. "Not even my clones are spared from my suffering." "Oh well, not a big deal," he muttered mirthlessly. The clone chuckled lightly as his hand slowly evaporated into nothing but pure chakra, quickly dissipating into the air. The same process began to work its way over his entire body until he had vanished completely. The only sign that the clone had existed at all was the almost undetectable amount of chakra that now laced a large portion of the cave's floor. That and Naruto's Hiraishin kunai, but that wasn't really worth noting from his point of view. Stupid hacks jutsu that it was. On the shore of the large lake that girthed the absolutely enormous tree that the village was built around, Izo smirked slightly. His personal clones didn't return memories like the shadow clones, even though he could use the jutsu and its variants, but he could still sense its chakra, and know when the clone dispersed. Knowing from experience how stubborn he was, he could safely assume that his clone had accomplished the assignment he had tasked to it, so everything was going well in that regard, well, except for the 5 auto shinobi who were following him and Naruto. He would have to keep an eye on those once. "This place is not as impressive as I had expected," Naruto said casually, carelessly observing the rather standard and uninteresting buildings that made up most of the village. "You can say that again," Sakura agreed. It felt odd for her to actually agree with Naruto, but the blonde had made a valid point. Sasuke, in all of his Uchiha wisdom and greatness, merely grunted and turned expectantly to Kakashi. Said man was currently more focused on his book than anything else. More than likely, the pervert was wondering just why the Icha series were made to be waterproof. It was a blessing that the Cyclops didn't know the reason for it, lest he never be able to control his perverse giggling around women. No one deserved that kind of torment. It was also probably for the best that Sakura didn't know either. No one could predict her reaction, and such a thing was not wise to leave to mere chance. I wonder how long it would take to cut that colossal thing down," Izo mused aloud. "I'd estimate around 30 years, with the appropriate manpower, perhaps 46 seconds with a Baijuo. But hey, that's just my opinion." Everyone actively ignored the blindfolded teen as he continued to make random assumptions of time destruction calculations. The Taki shinobi were a little concerned that the Hokage had sent such an obviously unhinged boy as a delegate for village relations. It simply didn't make much sense. They did, however, not take the boy lightly, especially after he displayed the ability to become completely undetectable. If the Hokage sent that boy to their village, then there must have been a very good reason, or at least they hoped there was. It didn't take long for everyone to get over the awe-inspiring sight of quite possibly the largest tree one could find, after which they were silently escorted to the village leader. The walk to the leader's office, if you could call it that, was somewhat boring if not disturbing. Many of the villagers, of which were not very numerous, had looked towards the Konoha team with something akin to distrust. They weren't outright accusing them of anything, but they were definitely expecting them to do something underhanded. Apparently, the whole village was reclusive for a reason. One thing that the more experienced of the group, those being Kakashi, Naruto, and Izo, did notice, was the concealed hatred that almost all of the older villagers were glancing around with. It was disgustingly similar to how the people in Konoha looked around when they thought Naruto was near, as if they were searching for something to release their anger on. It was not something that the three were particularly happy to see, but there was some minor comfort in the fact that it wasn't actually aimed for Naruto this time. Although this realization did make Kakashi curious, more so than he should be on such a simple mission. The silver-haired Jonin wasn't one to question the Hokage's word, nor would he accuse the village leader of doing something underhanded. After all, being a ninja was all about underhanded tactics, and questioning was not usually the best thing to do in such a profession. However, realizing that Takigakura were acting this way towards their own Jinchuriki was bringing some questions up that worried the Cyclops. Did the Hokage really have an ulterior motive to this rather sudden mission? Were Naruto and Izo involved? Did it all somehow involve Taki's Jinchuriki? Kakashi banished those thoughts from his head. As inquisitive as he might be, the man knew when ignorance was a virtue. If Naruto and Izo happened to have a secret mission involving the Jinchuriki of another village, then he would stay far out of anything to do with it. He had not been involved from the get-go, so therefore his services were obviously not needed. Even if they were, he doubted he would happily go along with such a ridiculous plan. Jinchuriki were not the kind to mess with at the best of times, and certainly not when they were from a different village. So, with his plan to maintain ignorance, Kakashi continued with the mission he had actually been assigned. Should shit hit the fan, he would remain to protect Sakura and Sasuke whilst also staying out of the limelight of whatever chaos was going to ensue. Kakashi was not naive enough to think everything would go perfectly. Such a way of thinking could be left to children, civilians, and the occasional godlike shinobi, but not him. Life was a luxury he quite enjoyed, and would continue to enjoy for several more years if he had anything to say about it. Now, if only he could figure out why Jiraiya made the Icha books waterproof. Kurotsuchi was, for a lack of better words, not an average kunoichi. Unlike many other girls who would become kunoichi, she did not do it for a regular reason. She didn't have a crush on some boy who also happened to be striving to be a ninja, she didn't wish to become overly powerful and gain a reputation, and she most certainly did not plan on participating in any large-scale battles for the sake of excitement. Power and fame were not things she had ever wanted at any point of her short life, and she highly doubted they ever would be. That brings us to a reason for becoming a kunoichi. It was actually quite simple, stupidly so some would say, but it was her reason, well, the only one she could really think of anyway. Kurotsuchi was a kunoichi because she enjoyed it. While saying such a thing would normally get someone sent for a psych evaluation, as most people who claimed the same thing were crazy, Kurotsuchi was unique. She didn't actually enjoy the more despicable requirements of being a kunoichi, such as killing and or seduction missions, but she also wasn't one to be completely against them. As a ninja, she was expected of things. She was expected to serve her village to the best of her abilities, she was expected to do whatever was needed to be done to complete her mission or better Adiwa, and she was also expected to not hesitate to commit heinous acts for the greater good of her village. Kurotsuchi had literally no problem with any of the things she was expected of or required to do. She might not like it, but she would do her job because she enjoyed everything else that came with the profession. Overall, Kurotsuchi could easily claim that the good easily outweighed the bad when it came to being a kunoichi, until now. Sitting on the large and surprisingly comfortable bed that she had been given while within the Namikaze compound, Kurotsuchi thought long and hard over the options that were currently available to her. There were not that many and none of them ended happily for everyone. No matter which way she thought about it, any action she took would lead to her death in some way, or she would eventually get stuck with a seal that had the potential to kill her painfully. There was literally no winning in her current situation. If she killed Naruto, Izo would kill her. If she killed Izo, Naruto would kill her. If she killed both of them, the Hokage would kill her. If she didn't kill anyone and simply waited to be picked up by her grandfather, then she wouldn't be able to tell anyone any of the things she learned under the threat of an agonizing death. So now, she was stuck in the middle of an enemy village, within the home of Iwa's greatest enemy, unable to leave, and with almost no idea of what to do to make herself useful. She supposed she could try to seduce one of the boys, but Naruto was clearly too dense to fall for something like that, and Izo wouldn't be any better. Kurotsuchi really didn't want to be reduced to seducing a blind perverted clone/science experiment. That particular self-realization was what led to her next course of action, exploration and information gathering. If she could find out enough important stuff and note it down before she got the seal placed on her, then that would hopefully save her from when the Iwa Council asked why she didn't try seducing either of the boys. Kurotsuchi had no doubt in her mind that the old bastards would demand to know why she didn't use all of her skills to gather information. Anyway, with all of the Uzumakis now out of the compound for at least a few days, a fact that she found odd, Kurotsuchi had free reign of the castle in a matter of speaking. It was surprising that her temporary caretakers would so willingly leave her on her own, even if Kana had explained that she wouldn't be able to get into anywhere important. Leaving an enemy ninja in your house unattended was incredibly stupid. However, Kurotsuchi was not one to look a gift horse in the mouth. She was actually the kind to melt it down into something useful to her, but we won't focus on that for the moment. With a slightly cheerful smirk, the girl crawled off of the bed and sauntered to the door, which she had realized was covered in seals like every other door in the mansion. Sending one last reassuring glance to her new collection of Icha and making sure that they were all stacked neatly, she walked out of the room and into the hallway. One of the major benefits of having the place to herself was that she could relax and act as she did at her own home. Which, peculiarly enough, involved walking around in naught but her underwear. Kurotsuchi had to admit, the Ondaime Hokage had done a good job with having this place built, assuming that it wasn't built beforehand of course. The first floor, which her room was on, was larger than the second floor, having a kitchen, living room, dining room, 3 guest bedrooms with their own bathrooms, and the onsen in the back. There was also a small library but, she wasn't allowed in there. The second floor seemed to only have the master bedroom, a separate bathroom for some reason, a large secondary master bedroom, and another room that she wasn't sure of. She had already been well acquainted with the safe room underground, and she was aware of the basement that acted as Izo's room. It had concerned her at first that the older teen lived in the basement while Naruto and Kana lived in the master bedrooms, but she had banished that thought after Naruto had explained that it was actually Izo who claimed the basement as his own. Why the boy had done so was beyond even his family, but they were all aware of how luxurious Izo had made the underground space. Personally, the Iwakunoichi wanted nothing to do with either of the underground rooms, especially the one that Izo had taken her to put her seal on. Speaking of her seal, it actually looked pretty cool, if she did say so herself. Yes, she did have to reveal far more of herself than she was happy about, even if Izo was blindfolded, but the end result was rather appealing. The seal took the form of a small circle of kanji that surrounded a small triangle with a single bold kanji at each point. From what she could understand, the outer ring of kanji were simply there to state the rules that the seal evoked on her, while the 3 kanji at each point represented the major points of the seal's function. The solid lines of the triangle she could only guess were there to strengthen the overall design. Other than that, she had nothing. Seals were not her forte. But it being placed just to the left of her navel looked pretty cool. Deciding to check the upstairs section of the house first, Kurotsuchi sauntered up the stairs. The very first room on the second floor happened to be the large separate bathroom of the house, which she already knew was unlocked, so she didn't bother checking in there. The next room was the secondary and slightly smaller master bedroom. Why a house had 2 master bedrooms, she did not know. Had she have known that Minato Namikaze had built himself a second bedroom for when Kushina banished him, she probably would have laughed herself to tears. Unfortunately, that room proved to be locked, no matter how many times she tried to open it. The next room, which she had noted to be Naruto's room, was locked and sealed tighter than any other part of the house. That actually made sense, all things considered, so Kurotsuchi wasn't all too unhappy with not being able to get in there. She really hadn't expected to get in there anyway, so it was no real loss. The next room, however, was actually of mild interest to the girl. It wasn't because of what it might contain, but simply because none of the Uzumakis had told her what the room was, like they had the rest of the house. That, and she wanted to try to explore everywhere so as to not get hassled later on when she went back to Iwa. Walking calmly over to the door, Kurotsuchi gently tried to open it, her eyes widening in surprise as it actually opened slightly. Shrugging off her slight shock, the girl opened the door completely and peered inside, her pink pupilless eyes widening in more shock than she was comfortable with. Within a blink of an eye, not that she was blinking at the moment, Kurotsuchi felt extremely underdressed and slightly ashamed. The girl also couldn't help but feel extremely humbled at the sight before her, and also a bit miffed. Lying in the center of the room, were 2 immaculate white coffins, each one covered in extremely faint, if not almost unnoticeable cream-colored seals. Hesitantly entering the room, Kurotsuchi stared at the coffin on the left side of the room. It was identical to the other one except for one thing: on the center of the coffin was a large blood-red seal with a name printed in the middle of it in black. Kushina Uzumaki. Kurotsuchi read aloud in slight awe. The woman in question had a formidable reputation in Iwa, and not all of it was from her skill at slaughtering people during the Third Shinobi War. No, actually, Kushina Uzumaki had reputation as a woman who had kicked the asses of Iwa teams before simply giving them the option to retreat. She was remembered for being far too kind for her own good, and also for having a really bad temper. However, no one in Iwa suspected that Kushina was the same Uzumaki woman that the Yellow Flash had been with. Well, that wasn't entirely true. They had suspected it, they just disregarded it. How could such a merciful woman be with a man who slaughtered so many single-handed? Turning to look at the other coffin, she was not entirely surprised to see a large yellow seal on its center, the name Minato Namikaze printed within and in black. One other thing she noted that differentiated the coffins were the weapons that laid to the sides of each respective coffin. As expected, the Ondame's coffin had one of his trademark 3-pronged kunai next to it, while Kushina's had a long and very plain-looking sword. The only thing that made the sword noteworthy was the small sealing tag hanging from its hilt by a thin red rope. Kurotsuchi was feeling especially humbled as she stared at the 2 coffins before her, her eyes wide in awe, slight hatred, but mostly awe. She was standing in front of 2 of Iwa's most notorious enemies from the Third War, within the very house of the Yondame Hokage, in nothing but her underwear. They were hundreds of people from her village that would literally mutilate their own genitalia to get such a chance, but their intentions were probably not all too pure. Kurotsuchi, despite knowing exactly who the 2 were to Iwa, would not disturb anything in this room. Respect for a powerful foe was something that her grandfather had taught her before he got all grumpy and irritable. "I hope that your state of dress does not mean anything in regards to your intentions," Hiruzen said in slight amusement, from the doorway. The Iwakunoichi in question made a disturbingly high-pitched deep-like noise that was far too reminiscent of a certain Hyuga, as she jumped and turned to stare at the aged Hokage. The bright red blush that threatened to burn her face off was probably not going to be fading anytime soon as she tried hopelessly to cover herself with her hands. Her mind was racing through multiple things at that point, but one thing, a question, stuck out more than anything else she could think of. Just how the hell did he get in the mansion? The old Sarutobi shook his head. I fear I will never understand the youth of today. Walking around in such a way would have been seen as unbecoming of a kunoichi in my day, a pleasant view, but still unbecoming. He paused when he noticed that the girl blushed even brighter, somehow, at his pleasant view comment. Don't worry, you are far too young to gain attention from me, child. You are lucky though, had Izo found you like this, I doubt he would let you live it down. She stuttered nervously before hanging her head. Sorry, she muttered. Hiruzen chuckled softly. It's all right. I doubt you knew what was in this room when you came in here dressed like that, however, now that you do know, I trust you will not do anything disrespectful. For now though, I'll let it slide and keep it from the boys. I would rather not find out how Naruto would react if he found out you were in front of his mother's grave in such a state. The Hokage sighed as he pulled out a small scroll and tossed it to the confused and embarrassed girl. Seeing her stare curiously at the scroll, Hiruzen smiled warmly and gestured to it. I came around to give you a change of clothes as I wasn't sure if Kana had gotten you any yet. It has been over a week, but that woman can be quite forgetful of things like this. That scroll contains the clothes, which I suggest you put on with haste, he explained calmly. Kurotsuchi wasted no time in unsealing the clothes and putting them on, not really taking the time to see what the articles of clothing were until they were already on her. Pausing suddenly, she glanced down at her new attire and raised an eyebrow. She was now clad in a short black skirt and a dark red midriff shirt, along with plain white arm warmers. How she had not noticed the lack of coverage as she was putting them on, she didn't, nor did she want to know. Looking back up to the Hokage, she simply deadpanned at him. Is this some kind of joke? She asked emotionlessly. Hiruzen stifled a chuckle. Perhaps. I don't really know all too much about girls' clothing these days, so I requested one of my younger kunoichi to buy some clothes for someone of your measurements. If you dislike them, I can always take you shopping myself, he offered. Kurotsuchi took a moment to think about it, glancing down at the clothes every now and then back up to the old man. She couldn't exactly blame him for the clothing, nor could she really blame whoever picked them out. They were rather nice clothes after all. Plus, the midriff shirt showed off her seal, which she would have to ask later on if she could keep on her, deactivated, but still there. She didn't want to be bound to this place for the rest of her life. She shrugged casually. Nah, this'll do nicely for now. At least it's more comfortable than my shinobi uniform, she replied. Well, that's one thing out of the way. Now, is there anything else you might need? Sarutobi asked. The girl shook her head. Nope. But I do have a question, she said. The Hokage raised an eyebrow at that. And what would you like to ask? Has there been any word from my grandfather? She asked simply. Sarutobi frowned slightly. Not yet, I'm afraid. But even if there were, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I am not the one holding you captive in Konoha, he answered. What's that supposed to mean? Kurotsuchi asked in confusion. The village of Konoha might be where you are being held, but we are not actually your captors. The Uzumakis are the ones who captured you, they are the ones who brought you back here, and they are the ones that your grandfather will have to deal with for your return. As the Hokage of this village, I cannot allow clan actions to interfere with the rest of the village. I will act as the middleman. Yes, but I do not have any control over what really happens to you, he explained. But weren't you the one who placed me in the Uzumaki's care in the first place? She asked irritably. Have you never heard of putting on a show? There are several influential people in this village that would not take kindly to the news of the Uzumakis having taken you into their custody of their own accord. However, me placing you in their custody is a completely different matter that they have no right to complain about, the old Hokage said with a small frown. Unfortunately, that also means that I must technically answer for any wrongs the boys commit against you. Not that I believe they will actually do anything bad to you, of course. Well, Kurotsuchi began quietly. I suppose things could be much worse. All things considered, this is probably the best thing that could happen to me, at least I'm not being treated like an actual prisoner, she said. Hiruzen chuckled. You're not a prisoner. Actually, if you're anything, you're a political hostage, he replied lightheartedly. Thanks. That makes me feel so much better, she drawled. After a few moments of awkward silence, the Hokage deemed his task complete and bid the girl a farewell before leaving. Kurotsuchi, now clad in her new clothes, gave up on her plans of exploring the rest of the house. There wasn't all that much left to check anyway, and she honestly doubted that anything else could top the coffins of the Yondaime Hokage and his partner. If there was something that could top that, Kurotsuchi did not want to know about it. It was safer that way for everyone. Her thoughts drifted to Naruto, who she now knew as the child of two of Konoha's most renowned shinobi. If what she knew ever got released to Iwa, there would definitely be conflict. At best, Iwa would merely make the blonde a major target and put a hefty bounty on his head. At worst, there would be a small-scale war for the sake of killing the last of the Namikaze. Even she had to admit that the hatred so many in her village held for the Yellow Flash was petty and immature. Maybe, in the long run, it would be best if she had her memories of it all wiped. "This is rather unorthodox," the leader of Takigakure said irritably. Standing before him in his office, which was actually just a fancily furbished room in his house, was the Konoha team. The group of Taki ninja had left as soon as they had arrived at the leader's house, but there were still at least a few shinobi positioned around them for safety reasons. Unfortunately, in spite of the ninja around them, none of the Konoha Jonin could take the village leader seriously, and for once, this actually included Naruto and Izo. Kakashi was still keeping his nose buried in his book, not that his opinion on the matter would have been listened to. "We understand, Lord Shibuki, but the Hokage was rather insistent on this," Kakashi replied casually. "Surely you can understand his hesitance to wait around for a response given your village's record with such things." Our leader did not see waiting weeks for a reply to be worth it. Shibuki tried to glare at the Cyclops, key word being tried. "I actually cannot understand the Hokage's impatience. From this message, all I can determine is that your team is only here to try and settle trade agreements and promote village relations," he said, gesturing to the scroll on his desk. "Could your esteemed leader not wait a little longer for something so simple? Now, not only have you been made aware of my village's entrance, but you have also put me in a difficult situation. Just what am I supposed to do with you now that you have such information? To be fair, this is almost exactly the kind of situation that our presence is here to address. Taki is too reclusive to even communicate with effectively, so if anything, this is your own doing," Izo stated bluntly. The older teen was not what one would call a happy person at the moment. Although he was blindfolded, and no one was sure if he even had eyes, they could practically feel the lazy stare that he was aiming at Shibuki. The man in question was having to actively stop himself from flinching at the boy's eyeless stare, but he couldn't stop himself from sweating nervously. Truly, it was quite pathetic to see a village leader be so nervous and jumpy when in the presence of another village's delegates. Several seconds of silence was all it took before Izo sighed irritably. "Can we leave? The political parts of this mission are not really our business anyway," he asked in a bored tone, clearly referring to Naruto and himself. Shibuki once again attempted a glare, and once again failed. "I guess that would be okay. However, I will be having some of my men keeping an eye on you. Wouldn't want you to cause any more trouble than you already have," he said with as much authority as he could muster, which was next to none. Yeah. Don't break anything, don't kill anyone, and don't go places we aren't supposed to. We know the drill," Naruto said dismissively. No one said anything as the two brothers quickly left the room, although Shibuki did watch them go with an apprehensive frown of sorts. "Should I be worried about those two?" he asked nervously. Kakashi shrugged. "I honestly have no idea. But I would keep an eye on them anyway, just in case. I do, however, have a question of my own before we begin this meeting," he said calmly, actually putting his porn book away. "And what would that be?" Shibuki asked unsurely. The scarecrow gazed lazily at Taki's leader. "How is your village's Jinchuriki treated?" he asked simply. "This place is boring as hell," Naruto whined loudly. There was, literally, nothing to do around the village that couldn't be deemed as suspicious. Then again, the mission the Hokage had given him did not require discretion. Actually, the mission parameters were very clear on what was needed to be done. He himself found it slightly amusing to see just how blunt the old Hokage could be at times. The parameters were as such: assess the Nanabi Jinchuriki's situation, and extract it at all costs. There wasn't much else to be concerned with other than making sure not to kill the Jinchuriki themselves. It had been around an hour or so since he and Izo had split up to search for the Jinchuriki, even though Naruto knew that Izo could pinpoint the person's location in a heartbeat. He decided not to bring this particular fact up, instead opting to give his brother the time to himself that he obviously wanted. Even he could tell that the older teen had used up far more chakra than he would deem proper to plan for the shinobi following them. Whatever Izo had in store for those guys, Naruto really didn't want to know. His brother very rarely used up so much chakra unless he was showing off. or he wanted the target to suffer. The older sibling was not in a showing-off kind of mood. Back to the Jinchuriki issue, Naruto was having a difficult time figuring out how he was going to approach the entire thing. He was more than aware of his uncanny ability to bring out the good in people, which he had used and practiced on several root agents, but a Jinchuriki was not something he had any real experience with when it came to emotions. He wasn't stupid enough to assume that this person had the same outlook on life as he did, despite their similar situations, so just walking up to them and trying to be friendly probably wouldn't work. If, by some insane twitch of Kami's hand, the Jinchuriki got hostile and violent, then that was where things would start to get way too iffy. Being a Jinchuriki himself meant that he had an insane amount of power at his disposal, which could only be used in large and destructive ways. Capture missions were not something that came easy to him, much to his regret, as he wasn't one for outright killing people either. That job belonged to Izo. Either way, the blonde would be of little help should a large-scale fight break out. Any techniques he knew that could affect a raging Jinchuriki were too big and meant for widespread effectiveness. Once again, Naruto had to deal with the fact that Izo was better suited for the task than he was. Overall, the young Namikaze was best suited for fighting multiple enemies at once while overwhelming them, or taking on one opponent specifically and overwhelming them in much the same manner. That strategy, however, was useless against a living ticking time bomb of raw power. Sighing to himself, Naruto decided that it was better to try the gentle approach anyway. If it worked out, awesome. If not, too bad. So long as the village wasn't destroyed, and no one was killed, the mission wouldn't be a complete disaster. That was, of course, unless Izo decided to watch from the sidelines and not help out. His brother was probably the most well-versed person alive when it came to dealing with Jinchuriki, and he also had the abilities to handle such an opponent as well. The mission was practically hanging on the blindfolded teen's success. Naruto stumbled slightly as someone bumped into him hard and strode off quickly. Regaining his composure, he glanced behind him to see who it was that had so rudely disturbed his walk, only to see a girl with mint green hair striding away from him in a hurry. Normally he wouldn't take much notice, or invest much interest, into this kind of thing, but the amount of hatred and anger that the girl was emanating piqued his curiosity. With nothing else to do, and no real way of properly finding the Jinchuriki, the blonde started walking after the girl. Following the girl turned out to be a rather difficult thing to do, as she never once slowed her brisk pace through the village. While trying to keep up with the girl in a way that wouldn't be overly obvious, Naruto found himself in a front row seat to the villagers' reactions to the person he was stalking. On one hand, some of them simply ignored the girl entirely, whereas others glared at her and seemed far too happy to watch her walk away. It was around this point in time that Naruto subconsciously realized that he was following the Jinchuriki, but he didn't pay very much attention to that revelation. A few minutes later found him following the girl out of the village boundaries itself and into the surrounding forests. Naruto guessed that the girl had spotted him and was luring him away to deal with him somehow, or she actually lived out here. The latter of those two possibilities was the one Naruto would rather not to be true. Either way, the girl was continuing to walk deeper into the trees and he had already set his mind on following her, so he would just have to deal with whatever happened from here on out. On a positive note, since they were now out of the village, he didn't need to act so cautious and discreet. So little Naruto has a thing for the darker-skinned girls, eh? Can't say I really blame you on this one. She is quite cute, Izo said casually from beside him. Naruto didn't even spare the energy to be shocked or surprised by his brother's sudden appearance. 6 years had been more than enough time to get used to the older boy's apparent habit of doing such things for amusement. In all honesty though, the blonde had expected Izo to use this time to deal with their followers accordingly. It seemed he was wrong about that one. Why Izo was leaving them for so long was not a big concern to him, but why he was here with him now was. What are you doing here, Izo? Shouldn't you be dealing with the other ones? The blonde asked tiredly. It was a good thing that they were staying far enough behind the girl so she couldn't hear them. Well, there was this cloud you see, and it spoke to me. Not in words exactly, but the message was more than clear. So now I'm here helping you hook up with Mindy up ahead, Izo explained in quiet enthusiasm. Naruto deadpanned. She's the Jinchuriki, you were following me the whole time, and you're too lazy to deal with the other ones yet. Is that about right? He drawled. Izo's shoulders slumped and he hung his head. I never should have let you get so close to me. It's like I'm easier to read than an open book, he said in a downcast tone. I wouldn't say an open book per se, perhaps a book written in Braille, Naruto said offhandedly. That isn't all too comforting, you know. Is Braille even a thing? Izo asked curiously. Naruto shrugged before increasing his pace slightly. Their target was quickly increasing the distance between them, and he didn't want to lose her so effortlessly. Izo, being the laid-back individual he was, didn't argue and followed his little brother with an excited grin on his face. He knew without a doubt that Naruto did not start following this girl because he thought she might be the Jinchuriki, so the blonde had to have had a more personal motivation. Naruto finally showing interest in the opposite sex was far too intriguing a thing for Izo to miss out on. A few moments later and it had become glaringly obvious that they had lost sight of their target. Well, Naruto had at least. Izo never really had his sight on the girl to begin with, nor had he lost her like the blonde had. Seriously, the perks of being a censor made him wonder why the hidden villages weren't trying to speed breed armies of them. Naruto did have his negative emotion sensing thingy, but that only went so far when it came to actually locating people. At best, it acted as an early warning system for attack. Speaking of attack, both boys were forced to come to a sudden stop as several kunai lodged themselves in the ground in front of them. Glancing up in unison, the two were met with the orange-eyed glare of the girl they had been following, and if the kunai were anything to go by, she was not very happy. Naruto managed to pick up a slight spike in her anger while Izo could sense her chakra flowing in a distinctly unnatural way. They both prepared themselves for what was going to more than likely be some form of attack. "Why are you following me?" the girl asked heatedly. "Would you believe me if I said we just wanted to talk?" Naruto asked hopefully. The girl glared at him as her chakra spiked a little more. Her orange eyes, which Naruto almost fell in love with on the spot, shifted to Izo in an almost expectant manner, as if she were expecting a better explanation from him. Naruto's infatuation with the color orange aside, it was clear that things were not going to work out in a peaceful way. This assumption was proven and further cemented by Izo's response of shrugging lazily. "Don't look at me, girl. A cloud told me to be here," he replied casually. "They hired you, didn't they?" She screamed in outrage, her chakra spike reaching a new level of high. "Well, I'm not going to die so easily, you hear me? I'll kill you and every other mercenary they send after me." With that bold statement, the girl disappeared in a burst of speed. Naruto quickly pulled out two of his Hiraishin kunai while Izo melted into the ground. The blonde was at least confident of being able to overpower the other Jinchuriki if things got too bad, and Izo still maintained his neutrality to the fight, but he really didn't want to hurt her. If he was lucky, she wouldn't even be capable of any more than one tail's worth of the Baiju's chakra, any more than that and he was risking actually getting himself injured. A slight rustling of a nearby tree was enough indication for Naruto to spin around quickly and throw one of his kunai up into the foliage. The mint-haired girl launched herself out of the tree and straight towards him, putting herself directly in the flight path of his kunai, which she then proceeded to swat away like a fly. The blonde barely had time to flash to said kunai before the girl collided violently with the ground where he once stood, a large cloud of dust and broken earth shrouding the small area. As soon as Naruto landed back on the ground, he was forced to leap into the air to avoid a powerful kick. Reacting quickly, the blonde threw one of kunai at the girl again from above, the small projectile once again being swatted away without a care. One thing that Naruto did notice, however, was the lack of a cut on the girl's hand from coming into contact with his weapon, which he always assured were razor sharp. Combined with the force and power with which she had impacted with the ground before, and Naruto could safely assume that this girl was far stronger than she appeared. So, thick skin that is harder to cut through, and increased physical strength and speed. This girl is almost a female version of Izo, save for all of the weirdness, Naruto assessed calmly. "So long as I don't take a direct hit I should be fine," he concluded before quickly flashing over to his other kunai again to dodge a punch that splintered the tree branch he had been on. "Stand still and let me kill you," the girl yelled angrily as she launched several shuriken at the blonde. "I'm not here to hurt you, for crying out loud. Just stop trying to kill me and let me explain," Naruto exclaimed. "Like I'm going to believe that one again. The last ones to say that tried to kill me and I won't be caught off guard again." She stopped suddenly and went through several hand seals. Suten, tornado of water jutsu. The girl suddenly lunged at Naruto and began to spin rapidly in midair, a powerful vortex of water forming around her and making her charging attack far more dangerous. The vortex, combined with her spinning and her rage, made the attack sloppy and poorly aimed, allowing Naruto to easily sidestep the entire jutsu. As she flew past him within her water vortex, the blonde Jinchuriki raised one of his kunai and brought it down hard on the rushing water construct. The water exploded violently, sending both Naruto and the girl flying away from each other, but otherwise unharmed. Glancing down at his kunai, Naruto was surprised to see that the tip of the blade had been very smoothly ground off by the water vortex. The amount of chakra she must have put into the jutsu to do that must have been way more than was necessary, that or she was just that damn good with the jutsu in general. The blonde silently hoped for the former as he discarded the blunted kunai and pulled out a new one. A few more minutes of assessing the girl and he would be able to properly figure out the easiest way to take her down without hurting her too much. He just really hoped that she didn't start pumping out chakra like a factory. The last thing either of them needed right now was her turning herself into the world's brightest beacon for the village to see. Things would get even sketchier if a bunch of Taki ninja decided to intervene, or worse, Kakashi. Kakashi was having an okay day, if one could call it that. Takigakure was a small village and didn't have much to offer in terms of entertainment or shopping. That was where his problem laid. Sasuke wanted to do something to take his mind off of the fact that they couldn't really train while in the village, and Sakura wanted to go shopping for the different styles of clothes. Had these two have been under any other Jonin's care, they would probably be listed as MIA. Such a thought had crossed his own mind on more than one occasion, and if it hadn't have been for his debt to his old teammates, he would have gone through with it. Then there was the whole issue of Naruto and Izo just vanishing from the village altogether. Apparently, the shinobi Shibuki had sent to keep an eye on them had given up as soon as Izo vanished completely and Naruto left the village boundaries. Whatever those boys were up to, it was not going to be good. Any unorthodox actions within another hidden village usually ended with a lot of paperwork, for both him and the Hokage, so he was well within his rights to be worried. His reading time depended on it. The Cyclops didn't let it bother him too much though, since there wasn't anything he could do about it as it was. He didn't understand the situation that the Uzumakis had gotten themselves into, so going in and trying to assert control himself would only cause more problems and he didn't want to risk jeopardizing a secret mission from the Hokage. For now, the best he could do was try and keep an eye on his two remaining Shin'an and hope not to have a mental breakdown. Said task was proving to be harder than expected since the interests of said Shin'an kept sending them in opposite directions. A faraway explosion of chakra put everyone, even the civilians, on high alert. Kakashi was one of the more sensitive shinobi in the area when it came to chakra, and the sickly aura that was quickly spreading through the area was a clear sign of the source of the chakra. After the Kyuubi's attack there were not very many Konoha ninja who didn't know what a Baiju's chakra felt like, and how stupid it would be to head in that direction. The silver-haired man sighed and put away his book. Seems those boys really were after the Jinchuriki. This isn't anywhere near foul enough to be the Kyuubi, so that leaves Naruto out of the possibilities, thank Kemi. Only question now is how they plan to deal with the raging Jinchuriki, and whether or not this will come back to kick us in the ass, he thought calmly. Glancing around lazily, he wasn't surprised to see all of the civilians rushing into their homes and the shinobi getting ready to defend the village. It seemed that none of them were planning to actively search out the Jinchuriki and were more than content to let it continue to rage outside of the village boundaries. Such a tactic was probably best. Taki was not well known for producing too many shinobi capable of battling the likes of a Baiju-powered super weapon. The worst case scenario was if some wannabe shinobi went and drank the hero's water, but that was unlikely. His hand quickly lashed out and grabbed Sasuke by his collar before the Uchiha could run off towards the chakra. "And where do you think you're going?" the Jonin asked curiously. Sasuke glared at the man. "That power. I need to know what it's coming from," he said. "You can't seriously want to run towards whatever that is, right Sasuke-kun?" Sakura asked hesitantly. The pink kid wasn't sure if she would have the guts to follow her crush if he went after that. "Neither of you'll go anywhere. Whatever is happening out there is none of our concern, nor will it become any of our concern. This is something for Taki to deal with as they see fit," Kakashi stated sternly. "Then where are the Uzumakis?" Sasuke retorted. Kakashi narrowed his one visible eye on the Uchiha. "This is none of our concern. What the Uzumakis do now is of their own accord and we will not get mixed up in their mess. I swore to protect you two as part of my Shin'an team, and that is exactly what I am going to do. Now, we are heading back to Shibuki. Hopefully he has a little more information on what is happening here." The village leader had been surprisingly tight-lipped about the local Jinchuriki in the previous meeting. With that being said, the three Konoha shinobi began walking back to the village leader's office. Kakashi could only hope that whatever Naruto and Danzo had planned worked out properly. Explaining the death of Konoha's Jinchuriki to the council was not something he was prepared to deal with. "This better work out," he mumbled mentally. Back with the Jinchuriki, a few minutes earlier, Naruto ducked under a powerful kick. Using the opening that the attack left, he went to uppercut the girl. He was quickly cut off, quite literally, by a long sword made of water that carved down through his arm and sliced him in two before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. The real Naruto, accompanied by 2 shadow clones, watched on with interest as the girl showed an impressive amount of flexibility along with her strength. The water sword that she kept whipping out every now and then was also quite interesting. As far as the blonde could tell, she didn't have a source of water on her to keep making it over and over, as she had been, and she didn't seem to need any notable length of time to create it. So far, every minute that Naruto spent fighting her, the more dangerous she proved to be. At the moment, he would guess her to be at least low Chunin level in everything other than Genjutsu, probably higher if she weren't so angry. Hyotan, Ice Prison Jutsu. Naruto watched in slight disappointment as the girl was suddenly encased in ice, Izo having phased into existence behind her mere seconds before. He really shouldn't judge his brother for being all sneaky and underhanded when it came to fights, especially considering what would happen if Izo did go all out with jutsu, but he was still young and was more inclined to fights full of flashy techniques. Other than that though, he was glad that the fight had been ended quickly and without them having to hurt the girl too much. "I would get ready if I were you," Izo muttered from beside him. When he found the time to move to his side was not important for now. "What? Why?" "She's captured," the blonde said in confusion. "Yeah, but I can feel her chakra building up to ridiculous levels. I think she's handling being frozen the same way you do, and you and I both know how that turns out," the older teen replied calmly. Naruto made a whining sound. "Damn it, it took me like 3 weeks to figure out how to do that, and she goes and does it in 3 seconds. The world is so unfair," he complained. "Oh, stop whinging and get ready. I've already used enough chakra today as it is and I still need to preserve what I have left for dealing with the pests. Just knock her out quickly so we don't draw any more attention than we are about to," Izo said irritably. The sound of the ice prison cracking interrupted whatever Naruto was preparing to say, a light red mist seeping slowly from the hairline fractures in the frozen construct. The reddish mist continued to force its way out through the cracks, gradually making them wider and longer, until the entire prison exploded in a powerful surge of chakra. Whatever would have been left of the ice was melted and reduced to steam in the face of the raw chakra that the girl was now coated in. Naruto actually raised an eyebrow in concern. "Two tails?" he asked to no one directly. Indeed, the girl was standing before them, panting lightly, in a two-tailed Baijiu cloak. The orange of her eyes had spread and engulfed the colorless areas, her mint-green hair was flowing wildly in the small vortex of power that the chakra created, and her skin had gone slightly darker. All in all, any chances of a peaceful or otherwise not overly destructive outcome was washed away in an instant. Naruto sighed and pulled out several more of his Hiraishin kunai. He was going to have to put her down, and put her down hard. As he felt the small amount of Kyuubi's chakra seeping into his coils, he knew he was going to regret this in some way.
That's it for this video. I hope you all enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and follow me on my other social media accounts. Anime God here, and I'm signing off.